The fire flickered, casting long shadows on the stone walls of the ancient temple. The air carried the faint aroma of burning herbs, a whisper of prayers mingling with the crackling flames. In these sacred spaces, where the heavens and earth seemed to touch, stories were born. These weren't just tales for amusement, they were lifelines, passed from one generation to the next, weaving the essence of a people who believed their world was stitched together by the unseen hands of gods, spirits, and creatures both feared and revered. Persian mythology is a mosaic, each piece vibrant and charged with meaning. It holds within it echoes of a time when the world was divided into light and darkness, and humanity stood in the balance, tasked with tipping the scales. The roots of this mythology dig deep into the beliefs of Zoroastrianism, one of the earliest religions to teach about a single, all-powerful god, Ahura Mazda, and his eternal battle against Ingramenu, the destructive spirit. But this wasn't a simple battle between two forces. The tales that arose from this struggle were complex, layered, and alive, telling of cosmic wars and quiet acts of heroism, of creatures that guarded wisdom and beasts that threatened destruction. The stories weren't confined to temples. They spilled into bazaars, carried by merchants who had walked the dusty roads for weeks, sharing their wares and their words. In the flicker of lanterns, they would tell of Simurgh, the great bird with feathers of every color, whose wisdom was infinite. They would speak of Zahak, the cursed king with serpents growing from his shoulders, whose very existence was a warning against unchecked ambition. These stories would ripple outward, finding their way into the songs of shepherds and the whispered lessons of grandmothers. The land itself seemed to hum with the power of these myths. Mountains stood as silent witnesses to battles long past, their jagged peaks mirroring the ferocity of the struggles waged within the human heart. Rivers carried the whispers of the divine, flowing from the sacred Alborz mountains, believed to be the home of the gods. The deserts, vast and unyielding, became the stage for legendary encounters, where heroes faced creatures birthed from the nightmares of creation. In every corner of the ancient Persian world, from the bustling courts of kings to the quiet villages nestled in fertile valleys, these stories lived. They weren't just entertainment, they were maps, guiding people through the chaos of existence. They provided answers to questions that burned in every soul. Who are we? Why are we here? How do we face the shadows that creep into our lives? And, perhaps most importantly, what does it mean to choose light over darkness, even when the odds are stacked against us? The Shahnameh, Ferdowsi's epic masterpiece, became the treasure chest of this mythology, preserving stories that had been carried by oral tradition for centuries. Its verses sang of courage, betrayal, love, and loss, weaving the tales of kings and warriors, but also of the creatures who shaped their fates. These creatures weren't mere backdrops, they were forces unto themselves, embodying the fears and hopes of a people who stood at the crossroads of civilizations. The fire of Zoroastrianism burned brightly in these stories, but it wasn't the only source of their power. Persian mythology was also enriched by the lands that surrounded it. The Babylonians brought their tales of cosmic battles, the Greeks their gods and heroes, and the Indian subcontinent its visions of sacred beasts and celestial realms. Persia, with its crossroads of trade and conquest, absorbed these influences, transforming them into something uniquely its own. The result was a mythology that shimmered with layers, each one adding depth to the tapestry. It is within this richness that the creatures of Persian mythology truly come alive. They are not just characters in a story but reflections of humanity's struggles and aspirations. The Simurgh represents the hope for guidance when the way forward seems impossible. Zahak is a stark reminder of what happens when power is pursued at the cost of one's soul. The Paris, with their ethereal beauty and playful nature, echo the complexities of human desires. And the Daevas, the dark demons, show the chaos that arises when balance is lost. But these creatures were not just confined to myth. They leapt from the pages of the Shahnameh onto the walls of ancient palaces, their images carved into stone and painted onto tiles. They adorned the robes of kings and the banners of armies, their presence a reminder of the eternal truths they represented. Even today, their stories linger, not just in the lands of their origin but across the world, carried by those who recognize their universal resonance. As one story ends, another begins. The embers of the fire in the temple slowly die down, but the warmth remains. There is more to this tapestry, threads that glimmer and call to be followed. In the fading light, a shadow moves, a figure, vast and majestic, its feathers catching the glow of the last ember. It waits, ancient and wise, ready to take us into its wings. The moonlight bathed the ancient city in silver, illuminating the grand mosaics that adorned the walls of its temples and palaces. These mosaics were not just decorative, they told stories of creatures that were larger than life yet deeply intertwined with the essence of what it meant to be Persian. In these depictions, one could see a truth far greater than mere legend. These beings were not just products of imagination but the heartbeat of a culture, a bridge between the mortal and the divine. Simurgh, with its resplendent feathers, soared high above the rooftops of human thought, embodying wisdom and protection. For centuries, it was said that this magnificent bird nested in the sacred Alborz Mountains, waiting for the moments when humanity needed its guidance the most. But Simurgh was not just a symbol of guidance, it was a symbol of unity. Its feathers, a cascade of all colors, whispered a message of harmony, that beauty and strength come from diversity. It was not uncommon to see its likeness embroidered onto royal robes or painted onto the ceilings of grand halls, a constant reminder that those who sought power must also seek wisdom. Then there was Zahak, whose tale sent chills through every heart. His image, often carved into stone, was a grim reminder of the corruption that could consume a ruler's soul. The twin serpents that grew from his shoulders were no mere embellishments, but a stark representation of the monstrous greed that could arise when desires ran unchecked. Children were told his story not just as a cautionary tale, but as a moral compass. Beware, their elders would say, for every time you ignore justice, the serpent feeds. Zahak's presence lingered in the very fabric of Persian governance, a symbol of what to guard against in the pursuit of power. Paris fluttered through the pages of literature, their delicate beauty and mischievous nature capturing the imagination of poets and storytellers alike. They were not just beings of light and air, they were reflections of human aspirations and imperfections. Their tales of redemption, of finding the light after wandering in shadows, resonated deeply in a culture that valued the balance between good and evil. In art, their forms graced the margins of illuminated manuscripts, their figures seemingly alive, poised between grace and mischief. The Daevas, on the other hand, were darkness incarnate. In Zoroastrianism, they symbolized the chaos and destruction that sought to unravel the order established by Ahura Mazda. Yet even in their malevolence, they were necessary, for without them, the valor of heroes would have no meaning. Sculptors and painters gave them grotesque forms, their jagged teeth and fiery eyes reminders of the dangers that lurked in the absence of virtue. They were often depicted in combat with heroes like Rostam, their defeats a testament to the triumph of courage over despair. In Persian religion, these creatures occupied a sacred space, acting as intermediaries between the mortal world and the divine. The fire temples, where Zoroastrians gathered to honor Ahura Mazda, often bore symbols of these beings, not as idols but as representations of larger truths. Simurgh was there to remind the faithful of the wisdom that came from introspection, while the Daevas warned against the temptations of the material world. The creatures were not gods, but manifestations of the forces that shaped the human experience. Literature carried these myths to heights that even the mountains of Persia could not reach. Ferdowsi's Shahnameh became a vessel, preserving the essence of these beings for generations to come. Each stanza seemed to pulse with life, painting vivid pictures of Simurgh healing the wounded, of Zahak serpents hissing their demands, of heroes confronting the Daevas in battles that echoed humanity's struggles. Persian poetry, rich and evocative, often wove these creatures into metaphors, comparing love to the freedom of Paris or betrayal to the venom of Zahak serpents. Art, too, paid homage to these beings. The walls of Persepolis bore intricate carvings of griffins, their wings spread wide, their forms a testament to power and guardianship. Ceramics and textiles were adorned with images of Simurgh, its feathers shimmering in golden threads. Painters brought these creatures to life in miniatures, their brushstrokes delicate yet deliberate, capturing every nuance of their mythic essence. Even architecture bore their influence. The arches of bridges were said to mimic the graceful curves of Simurgh's wings, while the columns of palaces rose as if they were the legs of griffins, holding the heavens aloft. But these beings were not confined to temples, literature, or art. They lived in the very identity of the Persian people. Farmers would whisper prayers to Simurgh before planting their crops, seeking its blessings for a bountiful harvest. Warriors would invoke the strength of the Griffin before marching into battle, their shields bearing its image. Mothers would place amulets bearing the likeness of Paris near their children's cradles, hoping to protect them from the malice of Daevas. The myths were not just stories, they were woven into the rituals, the everyday acts of a culture that understood the power of symbolism. Even today, their legacy lingers. The stories of these creatures are told not just in the homes of Persia but across the world, their messages resonating with universal truths. The Daevas remind us of the chaos we must overcome, the Simurgh of the wisdom we must seek, the Paris of the beauty and redemption, and Zahak of the perils of unchecked power. The fires that burned in the temples may have dimmed, but their warmth remains. In the flicker of their embers, a shadow emerges, a creature vast and serpentine, its eyes burning with a warning and a promise. Zahak stirs, his serpents twisting in the darkness, pulling us toward his story. The air thickens, the echoes of his name reverberating through the silence, urging us to confront what lies ahead. The sound of ancient chants filled the air, a melody older than memory itself. It carried the weight of centuries, the voices of ancestors who had long returned to the earth yet whose words lived on. These chants, these whispered tales by firelight, formed the lifeblood of Persian mythology, a mosaic pieced together from sacred texts, the rhythmic cadence of oral traditions, and the silent testimonies of stone and clay. In these fragments, a world both timeless and immediate unfolded. The Shahnameh, that magnificent epic of kings and heroes, was a treasure chest of such stories. Crafted by Ferdowsi, it stood as a defiant act of preservation, capturing the soul of Persian mythology at a time when it risked being swallowed by the tides of history. Its verses spoke not in lofty abstraction but in a language that touched every heart. Here were kings flawed and noble, warriors whose courage burned brighter than the sun, and creatures who blurred the line between ally and adversary. The Shahnameh was more than a book, it was a living heartbeat, an affirmation of identity and the human spirit. But the roots of these stories stretched far deeper, anchored in the Avesta, the sacred text of Zoroastrianism. The Avesta was a symphony of prayers and hymns, its words shaped by fire and devotion. It spoke of Ahura Mazda, the Lord of Light, and his eternal struggle against Ingramenu, the spirit of chaos. Yet, nestled within its spiritual teachings were glimpses of a world teeming with life, beasts that roamed the heavens and demons that clawed at the edges of existence. Creatures like Aži Dahāka, the dragon of despair, were not mere symbols but manifestations of the fears and hopes of a people standing at the threshold of cosmic war. Beyond the written word, there was the oral tradition, a thread that stretched back to the dawn of civilization. Around hearths and under starlit skies, storytellers wove their magic. Their words, unbound by parchment, shifted and adapted with the rhythms of time. A story might begin in one village as a tale of heroism and emerge in another as a lesson in humility. These narratives were not static, they were rivers, flowing and reshaping the landscape of Persian identity. Imagine an elder in a bustling market, his voice rising above the din, recounting the tale of Simurgh's wisdom to a rapt audience. His words were not merely entertainment but an inheritance, passed down with reverence and responsibility. The details of the stories might change, but their essence remained steadfast, a testament to the resilience of a culture that refused to let its soul fade. And then there were the silent witnesses, the stones, the carvings, and the fragments of pottery unearthed from the sands of time. Archaeological findings whispered of a world where the line between myth and reality blurred. Reliefs from Persepolis showed griffins with majestic wings, their forms carved with a precision that suggested not just artistry but belief. The ruins of ancient temples hinted at rituals long forgotten, where fire and incense summoned the presence of beings from the unseen. Even in their silence, these artifacts spoke volumes, a dialogue between the past and the present. In these findings, one could see the continuity of a narrative that spanned millennia. A carving of a serpent might echo the terror of Zahak, its sinuous form a reminder of the price of unchecked ambition. A fragment of a vase could bear the image of a Pari, its delicate figure a tribute to the beauty of redemption. These physical remnants grounded the myths, making them tangible, accessible, and enduring. The beauty of Persian mythology lay not in its coherence, but in its complexity. It was not a singular narrative, but a constellation of stories, each one contributing to a greater whole. The Shahnameh might elevate a hero to legendary status, while oral traditions might recount his flaws, and archaeological finds might immortalize him in stone. Together, these sources created a tapestry rich with nuance and depth. Yet, even as one strand of the tapestry ends, another begins to emerge. The ancient stones seem to stir, their carved figures shifting in the flicker of torchlight. Among them, a face begins to take shape, stern, regal, and crowned with serpents. Zahak waits, his presence commanding, his story calling. The air tightens, charged with the promise of darkness and the faint whisper of defiance. The wind swept over the peaks of the Alborz mountains, carrying whispers of a time when the world was still raw and untamed. At the heart of these rugged heights, where the heavens kissed the earth, lived a creature of breathtaking magnificence. The Simurgh, a being so ancient that its feathers seemed to hold the memory of the universe, perched atop the mystical tree of life. Its wings stretched wide, shimmering with every color imaginable, as if the dawn and dusk had been captured and woven into its plumage. The Simurgh was no ordinary bird, it was eternal, reborn from its own ashes every 1,700 years. Each cycle of its life mirrored the cyclical nature of existence, birth, death, and renewal. This creature, both guardian and guide, was said to bridge the realms of the mortal and divine, a living embodiment of wisdom and compassion. Its origins were not confined to a single story, it existed as a thread that wove through the tapestry of Persian mythology, appearing when the world needed its light the most. One of the most cherished tales of the Simurgh comes from Ferdowsi's Shahnameh. The hero Zal, born with hair as white as snow, was abandoned by his father, Sam, who feared the child's appearance was a curse from the gods. Left alone on a mountainside, the infant's cries carried on the wind, reaching the ears of the Simurgh. The great bird, moved by a compassion as boundless as the skies, descended from its perch and cradled the child in its talons. Zal was raised beneath the shadow of the Simurgh's wings, nourished by its care and wisdom. The bird taught him not only survival but the deeper truths of existence, how to navigate the treacherous currents of life with courage and integrity. When the time came for Zal to return to his people, the Simurgh gifted him 3 of its feathers. It told him, "Burn a feather if ever you are in dire need, and I will come to your aid." With a heavy heart, Zal descended the mountain, carrying the love and guidance of his celestial guardian. The bond between Zal and the Simurgh remained unbroken. Years later, when his wife Rudabeth faced a perilous childbirth, Zal burned one of the feathers. In an instant, the skies darkened, and the Simurgh appeared, its wings casting a golden light over the troubled land. It instructed Zal on how to safely deliver the child, giving rise to the hero Rostam, whose feats would echo through the annals of Persian history. The Simurgh, though otherworldly, was deeply connected to the lives of mortals, offering its wisdom not as an aloof deity but as a compassionate guide. Beyond the Shahnameh, the Simurgh's presence permeates Persian thought and spirituality. It is said to live in the branches of the Geocarina, the tree of life, which bore the seeds of all healing plants. The tree and the bird were inseparable, their existence intertwined like the roots and leaves of a great oak. Whenever the waters of creation stirred, the Simurgh's wings would shake, scattering seeds across the earth to bring life and balance to the world. This act was not just a myth, but a sacred reminder of renewal and the interconnectedness of all things. In another tale, the Simurgh plays a crucial role in the quest for truth. The Conference of the Birds, a mystical Persian poem by Adar of Nishapur, tells the story of birds searching for their king. Guided by the Hupu, they traverse 7 valleys of spiritual trials, only to find that the Simurgh is not a separate being but a reflection of themselves. The name Simurgh itself is a play on words in Persian, meaning 30 birds, highlighting the unity and divine essence within each seeker. This story transcends mythology, resonating as a profound allegory for self-discovery and enlightenment. The Simurgh's wisdom is not limited to grand heroes or spiritual seekers. Farmers would invoke its blessings for a good harvest, and artisans would weave its image into their work, hoping to capture a fragment of its transcendent beauty. It became a symbol of hope and guidance for all who encountered its myth. The bird was not merely a character in stories, it was a force, a reminder that even in the darkest times, wisdom and compassion could light the way. Yet the Simurgh's legacy was not without its shadows. Some tales spoke of those who sought to trap it, hoping to harness its power for selfish gain. These stories often ended in tragedy, with the would-be captors undone by their greed. The Simurgh, while compassionate, was not to be bound by mortal desires. It represented a higher truth, one that could only be embraced through humility and reverence. As the wind continues to howl through the Alborz mountains, it carries with it the echoes of the Simurgh's cry, a sound both mournful and triumphant. The feathers it left behind shimmer in the hands of those who remember its stories, a tangible link to the eternal. And yet, as its wings disappear into the clouds, the world stirs. From the shadows of the mountains, a darker presence begins to emerge, its serpents hissing, its eyes burning with ancient malice. Zahak awakens, his story curling into the void left by the Simurgh's fading light. In the quiet whispers of an ancient world, the Simurgh stood as more than just a mythical creature. It was the embodiment of wisdom and healing, a force that transcended the barriers of time and space. Perched on the mystical tree of life, it watched over creation, its feathers shimmering with an otherworldly glow. Each quill carried not just hues of the rainbow but fragments of knowledge, compassion, and balance, a living, breathing archive of all that was and all that could be. The Simurgh was revered not for its physical might but for the intangible power it held, the power to guide, to heal, and to illuminate the path for those lost in the darkness of ignorance or despair. Its every action spoke of a wisdom that flowed like an endless river, nurturing those who sought it with sincerity. Unlike many mythological beings who demanded worship or tribute, the Simurgh offered itself freely to those in need, embodying a rare purity of purpose. In the Shahnameh, its role as a healer is profound and deeply symbolic. When Zal, abandoned as a child and later burdened by his wife Rudabea's dangerous childbirth, turned to the Simurgh for aid, it responded with unwavering compassion. It did not merely solve their immediate dilemmas, it empowered them. By teaching Zal the steps to save Rudabeh, the Simurgh demonstrated that true wisdom lies in enabling others to confront their challenges with courage and knowledge. This act of healing was not limited to physical survival, it touched the soul, reinforcing the idea that wisdom and compassion are inseparable. Culturally, the Simurgh became a beacon of harmony. Its feathers, described as bearing all colors, symbolized the unity of diversity, a concept that resonated deeply within Persian society, where the coexistence of various tribes and beliefs was essential. To the Persians, the Simurgh's vibrant plumage was a reminder that strength lay in embracing differences, much like how its vast wingspan embraced the entire world. The Simurgh's connection to the Tree of Life, or Geokarina, elevated it further as a symbol of healing. The tree, said to contain the seeds of every medicinal plant, relied on the Simurgh to scatter its blessings across the earth. When the Simurgh shook its mighty wings, these seeds fell like rain, bestowing life and health upon all creation. This act was not random, it was deliberate and thoughtful, reflecting the bird's wisdom in maintaining balance and ensuring that every corner of the world received its share of sustenance. Beyond mythology, the Simurgh's symbolism extended into Persian art and literature. Miniature paintings often depicted it with an almost divine glow, surrounded by intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with life. Poets invoked its name to illustrate the pursuit of higher understanding. In Rumi's verses, the Simurgh became a metaphor for the soul's yearning for enlightenment, while Attar's Conference of the Birds used it to represent the unity and divine potential within every individual. These interpretations transformed the Simurgh from a mere character in myth to a timeless emblem of human aspiration. But what made the Simurgh truly extraordinary was its duality. It was both transcendent and accessible, celestial yet deeply tied to the mortal realm. This dual nature allowed it to resonate with people across generations, not as an unattainable ideal, but as a guide showing them that wisdom and healing could be achieved through reflection, humility, and connection. The Simurgh's guidance was not about offering easy answers, but about encouraging growth, often through adversity. Even in modern interpretations, the Simurgh continues to inspire. Its image graces public spaces, its stories talk to remind individuals of the importance of compassion and understanding. It serves as a cultural touchstone, a reminder of Persia's rich heritage and the enduring relevance of its myths. In times of turmoil, the Simurgh's legend offers hope, suggesting that even the darkest wounds can be healed with patience and care. Yet, just as the Simurgh symbolizes light and balance, it also casts a shadow, a warning against the chaos that arises when wisdom is ignored. In its absence, darker forces begin to stir, their malice feeding on fear and ignorance. As the Simurgh takes to the skies, a foreboding grows, its wings casting fleeting shadows over a land where serpents coil and whisper their venomous promises. The name Zahak lingers in the air, heavy with dread, pulling us into his unfolding tale. The brush of an artist pauses, poised in anticipation, as if waiting for divine inspiration to flow through it. The canvas before him is blank, yet in his mind, the Simurgh already takes form. Its wings are unfurled, feathers shimmering in hues of gold, sapphire, and emerald, each a story etched in color. Persian art, rich with symbolism and devotion, has immortalized the Simurgh not just as a creature of myth, but as an enduring testament to the beauty of wisdom, compassion, and the eternal. In the ancient frescoes and carvings of Persia, the Simurgh often appeared as a guardian figure, its form majestic and otherworldly. Reliefs from the ruins of Persepolis show creatures resembling the Simurgh, their powerful wings and regal stance symbolizing protection and sovereignty. These depictions served not merely decorative purposes, but were imbued with a sense of sacred guardianship. To the ancient Persians, the Simurgh represented a bridge between mortal struggles and divine grace, a presence watching over the land with boundless care. As the centuries passed, Persian miniature painting embraced the Simurgh, rendering it in breathtaking detail. In these delicate works, the bird was not just an image but a character brought to life. Each feather seemed to glow with an inner light, every curve of its form reflecting the flow of celestial wisdom. Often accompanying heroes like Zal and Rostam, the Simurgh was portrayed not as a distant deity but as an intimate guide, its gaze filled with understanding and its posture emanating strength. In Ferdowsi's Shahnameh, the Simurgh was given narrative flesh, and artists sought to bring its myth to visual life. A famed scene in many illustrated manuscripts shows the Simurgh descending from the heavens to rescue the abandoned infant Zal, its talons cradling him with tenderness. Another popular depiction is the moment when the Simurgh teaches Zal how to save Rudabeh, its wings outstretched as if shielding the vulnerable couple from the storms of fate. These images are not just moments frozen in time, they pulse with emotion, drawing the viewer into a story of resilience and care. Beyond visual art, Persian literature wove the Simurgh into its very fabric. Rumi's poetry often invoked the Simurgh as a symbol of the soul's longing for truth. In his verses, the bird became more than a myth, it was a reflection of the divine within. He spoke of its flight as a metaphor for spiritual ascension, a call to rise above the mundane and embrace the infinite. These words, though centuries old, resonate with timeless clarity, a testament to the Simurgh's enduring power. Perhaps the most profound literary exploration of the Simurgh is found in Adder of Nishaper's The Conference of the Birds. Here, the Simurgh transcends its mythological roots to become a symbol of unity and self-realization. The story of 30 birds undertaking a perilous quest to find their king, only to discover that they themselves are the Simurgh, speaks to the interconnectedness of existence. This allegory transforms the Simurgh into an eternal mirror, reflecting the divine potential within every soul. Adder's work is not merely a tale, it is a guide, urging readers to seek wisdom and truth within themselves. The Simurgh's influence extended beyond the realm of mythology and spirituality into cultural identity. It became a symbol of Iran itself, a representation of its resilience, beauty, and complexity. Artists and poets alike drew upon its image and essence to inspire a sense of unity and pride. Even in contemporary literature and art, the Simurgh's shadow looms large, a reminder of the rich heritage from which it emerged. Modern interpretations of the Simurgh often blend traditional depictions with contemporary themes. Artists use it to explore ideas of identity, migration, and transformation. The bird, with its cycles of renewal, resonates deeply in a world constantly in flux. Writers craft stories where the Simurgh becomes a metaphor for personal growth, its flight a symbol of breaking free from constraints. In every medium, the Simurgh adapts, its spirit remaining as vibrant and relevant as ever. Yet, as its vibrant wings fill the canvases and pages of Persian art and literature, the Simurgh's tales carry a bittersweet edge. For every depiction of hope and guidance, there is an unspoken awareness of the darkness that lurks at the edges of its stories. In the shadow of its beauty, a serpentine form stirs, a presence coiled and waiting, its venomous gaze fixed on power and dominion. Zahak's shadow begins to lengthen, his story pulling at the edges of light, drawing us into a world where the struggle for balance is far from over. The Simurgh soars, its vibrant wings a kaleidoscope of colors that ripple through time, transcending borders and eras. Though born of ancient Persian myths, this eternal bird finds its essence woven into the fabric of modern life, its presence both subtle and profound. In a world where ancient tales often fade, the Simurgh endures, not as a relic, but as a living symbol of unity, wisdom, and transformation. In Iran, the Simurgh remains a cultural icon, its image gracing murals, stamps, and logos, a testament to its deep-rooted significance. It symbolizes not only the rich heritage of Persian mythology but also the enduring values it represents: compassion, balance, and the pursuit of truth. Iranian artists, poets, and filmmakers continue to invoke the Simurgh, reinterpreting its legacy for contemporary audiences. In their hands, the bird transforms into a metaphor for resilience and hope in the face of modern challenges. Persian literature, both classical and modern, uses the Simurgh as a touchstone for exploring themes of self-discovery and enlightenment. In schools, children learn the tales of Zal and the Simurgh, their young minds shaped by the lessons of compassion and courage. Beyond Iran, the Simurgh's stories resonate with diasporic communities, becoming a bridge to their roots and a source of pride in their cultural identity. Its myths, carried across oceans and continents, find new homes in distant lands, enriching global narratives with their timeless wisdom. In a global context, the Simurgh's story finds parallels and movements toward unity and understanding. Its role in Adder's The Conference of the Birds, a symbol of collective self-realization, echoes in modern discussions of community and interconnectedness. In a fractured world, where divisions often overshadow commonalities, the Simurgh stands as a reminder of the beauty in diversity and the strength found in unity. The tale of 30 birds discovering themselves in the Simurgh resonates universally, offering a metaphor for the shared humanity that binds us all. The Simurgh's influence extends beyond art and literature into broader cultural expressions. Its imagery appears in fashion, architecture, and even digital media, adapted to modern aesthetics while retaining its mythical essence. Iranian designers incorporate the Simurgh's form into textiles and jewelry, blending traditional motifs with contemporary styles. In these creations, the bird becomes more than a myth. It is a statement of identity, a symbol of a culture that refuses to be forgotten. Globally, the Simurgh's story has inspired a new generation of creators. Filmmakers draw upon its symbolism to explore themes of rebirth and transcendence. Writers weave its myths into novels and screenplays, using its narrative to address issues of identity, migration, and the quest for belonging. Even in academic discourse, the Simurgh finds relevance, its cycles of renewal studied as a model for understanding ecological and social balance. The Simurgh also finds a home in spiritual and philosophical discussions, its myth transcending religious boundaries. For mystics and seekers, it represents the soul's journey toward the divine, a symbol of enlightenment that resonates across cultures and beliefs. In meditation and self-reflection practices, the Simurgh serves as a guide, its image a focal point for contemplating the interconnectedness of life and the infinite potential within every individual. Yet, amidst its glowing legacy, the Simurgh's modern relevance is also a call to responsibility. Its stories remind us that wisdom is not merely about knowledge, but about the choices we make. The Simurgh's role as a healer and guide underscores the importance of nurturing both ourselves and the world around us. Its presence challenges us to rise above greed and ignorance, to seek balance in a world often driven by chaos. As its wings cast fleeting shadows across the landscapes of today, the Simurgh's enduring relevance is not without its challenges. While its myths inspire, they also serve as warnings against forgetting the values they embody. The stories of the Simurgh are not static, they evolve with us, adapting to the complexities of a world in constant flux. They urge us to remember that healing, unity, and wisdom are choices, not inevitabilities. And yet, even as its wings span across modernity, the Simurgh's gaze turns toward the horizon. Beyond the edges of its flight, a new shadow rises, a force coiled in ancient malice, waiting to unravel the balance the Simurgh strives to maintain. Zahak stirs, his serpents hissing, their venom dripping with promises of power and darkness. As the Simurgh soars higher, the ground below trembles, pulling us into the ominous depths of the next tale. The air grows heavy with dread as whispers of Aži Dahāka slither through the shadows of ancient Zoroastrian texts. Before he became Zahak, the tyrant king whose reign bled the land dry, he was Aži Dahāka, a monstrous force of chaos and corruption. His very name sent shivers through the spines of those who dared to speak it, a symbol of everything that threatened the delicate balance of the world. In the sacred hymns of the Avesta, Aži Dahāka was no mere mortal but a demon of immense power, born from the dark will of Ingramenu, the embodiment of evil. Descriptions of his form are chilling: 3 heads, 6 eyes, and countless writhing serpents coiled about his body, each one spitting venom potent enough to blacken the earth. He was a creature designed to destroy, his very essence an affront to Ahura Mazda's creation. Aži Dahāka did not hunger for food or drink, he hungered for the world's undoing, feeding on fear, despair, and the blood of the innocent. But the transformation of Aži Dahāka into Zahak, the mortal king, adds a sinister depth to his story. It is said that Ingramenu, recognizing the potential for greater destruction through humanity's own hands, gave the monstrous demon human form. Zahak emerged not as a grotesque beast but as a handsome and ambitious man, charismatic and cunning. His beauty was a mask, concealing the darkness that writhed within, waiting to strike. The myth speaks of a young Zahak, easily swayed by flattery and power. Ingramenu approached him in the guise of a loyal servant, whispering poison into his ears. "You could rule the world," the demon said, "if only you rid yourself of those who stand in your way." Zahak, blinded by greed and the promise of glory, struck down his own father, claiming the throne. But this act of betrayal came at a cost. As Zahak's hands were stained with blood, Ingramenu revealed his true nature and bestowed upon the new king a horrifying gift. 2 serpents erupted from Zahak's shoulders, their scales glistening like black oil, their fangs dripping with malice. No blade could sever them, no spell could banish them. They were an extension of Zahak himself, feeding on his lust for power and magnifying his cruelty. To silence their endless hunger, human brains became their only sustenance, a ghastly demand that Zahak fulfilled without hesitation. The reign of Zahak is depicted in Zoroastrian texts as a dark age, a time when the earth groaned under the weight of his tyranny. Crops withered, rivers ran dry, and the air grew thick with the stench of decay. His court became a place of unspeakable horrors, where the innocent were sacrificed daily to appease the serpent's insatiable hunger. His power was absolute, his cruelty boundless, and his name became synonymous with fear. Yet, Zahak's story is not without moments of irony and grim reflection. Despite his demonic origins, he was still human in form, capable of choice. But every decision he made deepened his corruption, pulling him further away from redemption. The serpents on his shoulders were not just symbols of his tyranny, they were a reflection of his soul, twisted and poisoned by his own greed and ambition. The duality of Aži Dahāka and Zahak fascinates and terrifies. In Zoroastrian teachings, he represents more than just a physical threat, he is a moral and spiritual warning. His tale reminds the faithful of the consequences of succumbing to Ingramenu's whispers, of allowing darkness to take root in the heart. The serpents on Zahak's shoulders are metaphors for the destructive power of unchecked desires and the loss of humanity in the pursuit of power. But even in the depths of his reign, the texts hint at the inevitability of balance. Zahak, for all his might and malice, is not eternal. His story, though soaked in blood and despair, carries the faintest glimmer of hope, the promise that evil, no matter how powerful, cannot endure forever. As the serpents hiss and the shadows deepen, Zahak's rule continues to spread its venom across the land. Yet, far away, in the quiet corners of a suffering kingdom, whispers begin to rise. A blacksmith named Kavet sharpens his tools, not for work, but for rebellion. The hammers that once forged chains may now shatter them, and the flames of his forge may ignite the fires of revolution. The stage is set for a confrontation that will shake the heavens and earth, pulling us into the storm of resistance that follows Zahak's reign. The earth trembled beneath the weight of tyranny as Zahak's reign stretched like an endless shadow over the land. In the Shahnameh, Ferdowsi immortalized his evil, weaving a tale of oppression so suffocating that even the heavens seemed to weep for humanity. Zahak, the serpent-shouldered king, ruled not only with cruelty but with a calculated malice that left no room for hope. His every command was a venomous whisper of death, his very presence was a reminder of the cost of unchecked power. Under Zahak's rule, the land grew barren, as if the soil itself recoiled from his touch. His palace, opulent yet shrouded in darkness, stood as a grotesque monument to his gluttony for power. The serpents on his shoulders demanded a horrifying tribute, the brains of 2 young men every day. And so, the people lived in constant fear, their lives a fragile thread that could be snapped at the king's whim. But beneath this oppressive weight, something began to stir, an ember of resistance, faint but unyielding. The story pivots with the arrival of Kavet, the blacksmith whose name became synonymous with courage. When Zahak's men came for Kavet's son, the final offering to appease the serpents, the grief-stricken father refused to bow. His voice, raw with anguish and defiance, shattered the silence of oppression. In the Shahnameh's verses, his cry became a rallying call, a spark that ignited a fire within the hearts of the oppressed. Draping his leather apron on a pole, Kavet raised a banner of rebellion, its simplicity a stark contrast to the grandeur of Zahak's empire. From this rebellion emerged Firidun, the hero destined to end Zahak's reign. Born in secrecy and raised in the wild, Firidun was the antithesis of Zahak. Where the Serpent King was consumed by greed and fear, Firidun embodied courage and righteousness. His presence brought a sense of divine justice, as though Ahura Mazda himself had willed his rise. The Shahnameh tells of his journey to confront Zahak, a path fraught with danger but lit by an unshakable resolve. When Firidun reached Zahak's palace, the confrontation between hero and tyrant was not just a clash of men but of ideals. Firidun wielded a mace forged in the shape of a bull's head, a symbol of strength and determination. Zahak, armed with his serpents and the weight of his tyranny, stood as a manifestation of darkness. The battle that ensued was as much a struggle of wills as it was of weapons, a moment where the fate of the world seemed to hang in the balance. Ferdowsi's words bring this fight to life with vivid intensity. Zahak's cries were not of fear but of fury, his serpents lashing out with venomous rage. Yet, for all his strength, the king's arrogance was his downfall. Firidun struck with the force of justice, his mace landing a blow that echoed across the heavens. Zahak fell, but his death was denied. The forces of light and wisdom decreed he would not be slain but bound. The image of Zahak chained within Mount Damavand is one of the Shahnameh's most haunting moments. His serpents hissed, his roars shook the mountain, but his power was contained. This act of mercy was not born of compassion but of a greater understanding. Zahak was not just a man but a force of chaos, and his presence was needed to remind the world of the balance between good and evil. The mountain became his eternal prison, its cold stones a testament to the price of his ambition. Yet the tale of Zahak and Firidun does not end with chains. Even as the people rejoiced and the land began to heal, the mountain trembled. Zahak's hatred did not fade, and his whispers reached out from his prison, a lingering venom in the veins of the world. Ferdowsi's Shahnameh leaves us with this disquieting truth: the battle against tyranny is never truly over. Zahak serpents may be bound, but their shadows stretch beyond the mountain, a reminder of the vigilance required to protect freedom. And as the earth settles, a new story begins to unfurl, its roots in a distant past. The mountain that holds Zahak now trembles for another reason, a stirring beneath the stones, where a great dragon's eyes flicker open. The presence of Aži Dahāka lingers, pulling us into the ancient struggles of fire and darkness that have shaped Persian myths since time immemorial. Zahak is not merely a king, he is the shadow that falls across the soul when greed consumes the heart, when power corrodes the mind, and when corruption seeps into the very fabric of life. His presence in Persian mythology is a chilling reminder of the consequences when humanity strays too far from wisdom and justice. Zahak is not bound to the pages of ancient texts, his essence is timeless, lurking in the choices that tip the scales of good and evil. The serpents on Zahak's shoulders are grotesque and unforgettable, their venomous hunger a metaphor for insatiable greed. They symbolize desires that can never be satisfied, ambitions so consuming they devour the very people they are meant to serve. Each sacrifice to the serpents becomes a chilling reflection of how easily morality is abandoned in the face of self-interest. Zahak serpents are not external forces, they are the internal demons that grow when unchecked power festers. Zahak's transformation from Aži Dahāka, the monstrous dragon in Zoroastrian lore, into the mortal tyrant king is itself a symbol of the dangerous potential within humanity. As Aži Dahāka, he was a beast, a visible enemy to be fought. But as Zahak, he becomes something far more sinister, a man capable of deliberate cruelty. This shift forces the listener to confront a stark truth: evil does not always appear as a monster, sometimes it wears the face of a man, hidden behind charm and authority. The serpents also embody corruption that spreads silently but relentlessly. Each victim sacrificed to them represents the erosion of moral and social order. Zahak's court, steeped in fear and bloodshed, becomes a microcosm of a society poisoned from within. His subjects live under the constant threat of death, their fear keeping them silent and complicit. Zahak's reign is a symbol of tyranny at its most terrifying, not just the suppression of freedom but the destruction of hope. Zahak's own fall is a powerful symbol in its own right. Bound within Mount Damavand, his existence as a living prison serves as a warning that evil, even when subdued, is never entirely defeated. His chains are not just physical but moral, a constant reminder that tyranny can only be contained, not erased. This enduring presence of Zahak in the mountain echoes the eternal vigilance required to prevent greed and corruption from rising again. But Zahak's symbolism extends beyond individual morality to societal and cosmic levels. In the Zoroastrian worldview, he represents Druj, the lie, the force of chaos and disorder that opposes Asha, the truth and divine order. Zahak is the antithesis of balance, a force that thrives on the destruction of harmony. His rule is marked by the perversion of natural laws, where crops fail, rivers dry up, and humanity suffers. Through Zahak, the myths warn that when greed and corruption dominate, the world itself begins to unravel. In Persian art and literature, Zahak's legacy serves as a timeless allegory. Poets and writers draw upon his image to critique oppressive rulers, likening their excesses to the serpent's endless hunger. Zahak becomes a mirror held up to society, reflecting the dangers of allowing power to concentrate in the hands of those who prioritize self-interest over the greater good. His story is not confined to ancient Iran, it resonates across cultures and eras, a universal symbol of the destructive potential of unchecked ambition. Yet, amidst the darkness of Zahak's tale, there is a deeper message of resilience. For every Zahak, there is a Kaveh, a Firidun, a force of resistance, a beacon of hope. Zahak's symbolism is not just a cautionary tale but a call to action. It challenges individuals to recognize the serpents within themselves, to stand against the allure of greed, and to fight against the tyranny that threatens to consume the world. And as the mountain that imprisons Zahak stands silent, a new presence begins to stir in the depths of Persian lore. The stories of Aži Dahāka and Zahak fade, only to give way to the arrival of a creature even older, its shadow spreading across forgotten sands. The Huma bird rises, its flames flickering against the horizon, casting light upon the dark legacies Zahak has left behind. The image of Zahak has endured for centuries, carved into stone, painted onto parchment, and etched into the consciousness of a culture that refuses to forget the weight of tyranny. From ancient reliefs on weathered mountainsides to the brushstrokes of modern-day artists, Zahak has been depicted as both a terrifying figure and a poignant allegory for oppression. His serpents, his crown, and his presence are not confined to a single era but instead ripple through time, serving as a stark reminder of the power of stories to convey warnings and wisdom. One of the earliest known depictions of Zahak comes from ancient reliefs and inscriptions. While no definitive artifact captures his full mythological essence, scholars believe his connection to Aži Dahāka is reflected in the motifs of dragons and serpents found in early Persian art. These coiled and menacing figures were not mere decoration, they embodied chaos, fear, and the eternal struggle between good and evil. The artists who carved these symbols into rock faced the daunting task of making abstract concepts tangible, and Zahak's serpentine nature became the ideal vessel for such expressions. Later, during the Islamic Golden Age, as Persian literature flourished, Zahak's story found new life in illuminated manuscripts of the Shahnameh. The miniatures that accompanied Ferdowsi's verses captured the essence of Zahak with exquisite detail. In one, he is depicted as a king adorned in regal garments, his serpents coiling menacingly from his shoulders, their fanged mouths poised to strike. The juxtaposition of his kingly demeanor with the monstrous serpents is deliberate, a visual manifestation of the corruption hidden beneath the veneer of power. These illustrations did more than accompany the text, they breathed life into it, ensuring Zahak's image was as unforgettable as his deeds. In Persian carpets and textiles, Zahak's influence appears more subtly. Traditional designs often include serpentine forms and intricate patterns that mirror the chaos he represents. These motifs, woven with precision and care, serve as both a nod to the ancient tales and a reminder of the cultural weight they carry. Zahak's legacy, though dark, is woven into the fabric of Persian identity, a thread that refuses to be unraveled. Modern interpretations of Zahak take bold and varied forms. In paintings, his serpents are often exaggerated, their scales glistening with malevolence, their eyes burning with an unnatural light. Some artists choose to highlight his humanity, portraying Zahak not as a beast but as a man tormented by his choices, his face etched with the pain of his inner corruption. These contemporary depictions invite viewers to grapple with the complexity of his character. Was Zahak a victim of Ingramagnu's deceit, or did he willingly embrace the darkness? In cinema and theater, Zahak's story has been retold with dramatic flair. The clash between Zahak and Feridun becomes a spectacle of light and shadow, a performance that resonates with audiences far beyond Persia's borders. The serpents, brought to life through special effects or puppetry, become living symbols of the fear and greed that still haunt human societies. These performances transform Zahak from a distant myth into a mirror reflecting the struggles of the modern world. Even in graffiti and digital art, Zahak finds his place. On the walls of Tehran, bold and rebellious artists spray paint his image, blending ancient symbolism with contemporary messages of resistance. In the digital realm, Zahak appears in animations, comics, and even video games, his serpents slithering into new narratives that reimagine his story for younger generations. These modern forms of expression ensure that Zahak remains not just a figure of the past, but a living part of Persian culture. But it is not only visual art that keeps Zahak alive. His presence is felt in music and poetry, where his name is invoked as a metaphor for oppressive rulers and corrupt systems. The lamentations of poets echo the cries of Kaveh, the blacksmith who dared to stand against him, while musicians compose haunting melodies that evoke the despair and defiance of those who lived under his reign. Through every medium, Zahak endures as more than a character in a myth. He is a symbol of greed's destructive power, of the darkness that lies dormant in all who crave dominion over others. Yet, in every depiction of Zahak, there is also a reflection of hope, the unwavering belief that tyranny can be challenged, that serpents can be bound, and that even the longest shadows must eventually give way to light. And as Zahak serpents hiss in the background of each work, another figure begins to emerge, not in defiance, but as a complement to the themes of corruption and balance. The dragon Gandhariva stirs from the depths of Persian lore, a creature whose mythos intertwines with the forces of water and fire, echoing Zahak's chaos while introducing a new, elemental struggle. High above the mortal world, where the air is thin and dreams take flight, the Huma soars with wings wide as destiny itself. The bird of fortune, whispered to carry the divine favor of kingship, lives not in the forests or the fields, but in the boundless skies, unseen yet ever present. In Persian mythology, the Huma is not merely a bird, it is a vessel of hope, a symbol of justice, and a harbinger of blessings. Its feathers glisten with the light of eternity, and its flight is said to weave the threads of fate. The Huma's origins are steeped in mystery, its presence shrouded in the mist of ancient tales. Unlike creatures bound to earth or water, the Huma exists in the ethereal expanse between the heavens and the earth, embodying the unattainable and the divine. It is said that the Huma never lands, its feet never touching the soil of the mortal world. This eternal flight marks it as a being untouched by the corruption and suffering of humanity, a reminder of ideals unspoiled by the weight of existence. Stories tell of the Huma as a bringer of kingship, a celestial judge that bestows legitimacy upon rulers. In one tale, a king in despair gazes at the sky, seeking a sign of divine approval. As his eyes follow the Huma's flight, a single feather falls from its wing, landing upon his brow. This feather, imbued with otherworldly light, is both a blessing and a burden. It signifies not only the right to rule but the responsibility to wield power wisely. The Huma's touch is fleeting, yet its impact ripples through the generations, shaping the destiny of kingdoms. The Huma is also a symbol of transformation, its presence heralding profound change. Some legends claim that the mere shadow of the Huma can alter the course of a person's life. To those it graces, the shadow brings great fortune, lifting them from obscurity to prominence. But the Huma's shadow is not random, it seeks out the deserving, those whose hearts burn with purity and purpose. In this way, the Huma becomes a celestial arbiter, choosing its beneficiaries with a wisdom beyond mortal comprehension. The bird of fortune's name carries deep resonance in Persian culture, where it is often associated with the fire of Zoroastrian tradition. Its connection to kingship aligns with the divine flame, a symbol of purity and enlightenment. Just as the sacred fire was tended with utmost reverence, the Huma's myth conveys the sanctity of leadership and the need for rulers to act as stewards of justice and prosperity. Unlike Zahak, whose serpents symbolize corruption, or the Simurgh, whose wisdom is rooted in nurturing, the Huma's nature is fleeting and elusive. It does not stay to advise or intervene, its gifts are given without attachment, a fleeting touch of divinity that demands action from those it chooses. This elusiveness gives the Huma its mystique, a being that exists beyond the grasp of humanity, always watching, always moving forward. Art and poetry have immortalized the Huma as an emblem of unattainable aspirations. In miniature paintings, it is often depicted with brilliant plumage, a halo of light surrounding its form as it glides above mountains and valleys. Poets, inspired by the Huma's majesty, use its image to describe the loftiness of true love, the purity of divine will, or the weight of destiny. The bird becomes a metaphor for everything that humans strive toward yet can never fully possess. The Huma's legend also intersects with Sufi mysticism, where it represents the soul's journey toward enlightenment. Its constant flight mirrors the seeker's quest for union with the divine, a path that requires leaving behind earthly attachments. In this context, the Huma is not just a giver of fortune but a guide for those who dare to rise above their worldly constraints. Yet, the Huma is not without its contradictions. It is a bird of fortune, but its blessings often come with trials. The feather it bestows may bring power, but it also demands wisdom. Its shadow may uplift, but it also carries the weight of expectations. The Huma's gifts are not freely given, they must be earned, their worth proven through deeds. And as the Huma vanishes into the horizon, its flight leaves behind a lingering promise that fortune and transformation are never out of reach, even if they seem unattainable. But the skies are vast, and the Huma is not alone in its celestial domain. Beyond the clouds, another creature waits, its essence intertwined with fire and immortality. The legend of the phoenix begins to stir, its flames flickering with the echoes of the Huma's distant wings. In the quiet, mystical corners of Persian literature, the Huma soars with a grace that leaves an indelible mark on the heart. Its presence, though fleeting, echoes in the verses of poets and the tales told by wandering storytellers. As a symbol of divine favor, transformation, and the eternal pursuit of the sublime, the Huma transcends the confines of myth, seeping into the very soul of Persian cultural expression. From the intricate verses of Sufi poetry to the simple, evocative folk tales passed down through generations, the bird of fortune is more than a mere creature. It is a living metaphor for the human spirit's quest for meaning. In the world of Sufi mysticism, where the journey of the soul toward divine union is the central theme, the Huma embodies the struggle of the soul seeking enlightenment. Sufi poets, like Rumi and Hafiz, used the Huma as a symbol of the ineffable connection between the seeker and the divine. The bird, always in flight, never bound to earth, becomes the ultimate metaphor for the soul's desire to ascend, to rise above worldly attachments in pursuit of the eternal truth. In Rumi's poems, the Huma's flight is often described as the soul's yearning to break free from the limitations of the self. The Huma, always soaring in the skies, he writes, reminds us that we too must lift our hearts above the dust, leaving behind the trappings of the world. To the Sufi mystic, the Huma's perpetual motion mirrors the endless striving toward divine love, a love that is both a gift and a challenge. It is a love that calls the soul upward, urging it to reach for the unattainable, to chase after what can never be fully grasped. Hafiz, too, wove the Huma into his verses, using it as a symbol of grace and divine will. His poetry, filled with both joy and longing, often describes the Huma as a bird whose flight is not just a blessing but a test of one's faith. If you are fortunate enough to be touched by the Huma's shadow, Hafiz writes, know that the path ahead is one of trials and tribulations, but also of the sweetest rewards. For Hafiz, the Huma's fleeting presence is a reminder that true fortune is not something that can be chased or caught, but is granted by the divine to those who live in harmony with the universe. Beyond the world of Sufi poetry, the Huma also appears in Persian folk tales, where its symbolism becomes more accessible to the common people. In these tales, the Huma is not merely a celestial being but a figure of fortune that brings blessings to those who prove themselves worthy. One popular tale tells of a poor farmer who, through his kindness and generosity, is chosen by the Huma to receive its divine favor. The bird, in this story, does not simply bring wealth or power, it brings wisdom and a deeper understanding of life's true worth. In these folk stories, the Huma's gifts are not material but spiritual. Its shadow falling upon a person signifies that they have been chosen not for greatness, but for a life of service, humility, and enlightenment. The Huma's fleeting appearance serves as a reminder that divine favor does not come through striving for personal gain, but through living a life of integrity, kindness, and love for the world around us. The Huma also appears in Persian proverbs and wisdom literature, where it is used to convey lessons about patience, grace, and the unpredictability of fate. Chase not the shadow of the Huma, an old saying goes, for it will come to you when you least expect it, and leave when you seek it most. This saying reflects a common theme in Persian literature. The pursuit of fortune, whether it be wealth, power, or divine favor, is an endeavor that can never be forced. The more one chases after it, the more elusive it becomes. Only through living a life of purity, without expectation, can one truly receive the blessings of the Huma. Through every tale, every poem, the Huma takes on a new dimension. It is a bird that flies through the lives of those it touches, never remaining long enough for its presence to be fully understood, yet always leaving behind something of immense value. The Huma's fleeting nature mirrors the fleeting nature of fortune itself, whether it be wealth, fame, or love. These things come and go, but the blessings the Huma brings are not of the world. They are the blessings of the soul, of inner peace and wisdom, of a connection to something greater than oneself. In modern times, the Huma's symbolism continues to resonate in Persian literature. Contemporary writers, poets, and artists have revived the bird as a symbol of both hope and aspiration. Its image still appears in the works of Persian poets who, like Rumi and Hafiz before them, used the Huma to express the eternal search for truth and beauty. The bird's graceful flight continues to inspire those who dare to look beyond the surface of life, to seek out the deeper meaning that lies hidden beneath the veil of the ordinary. As the Huma's wings beat softly in the pages of poetry and the whispers of folk tales, another figure begins to stir in the myths of old. A creature whose flame is eternal, whose eyes burn with the light of wisdom and immortality. Its name is Phoenix, and it is ready to rise from the ashes, carrying with it the promise of rebirth and transformation. The Huma, with its wings spread wide against the endless sky, is not just a creature of myth, it is a living symbol of grace and rebirth, transcending the boundaries of time and culture. In the very air it breathes, the Huma carries the promise of renewal, of the endless cycles that govern life, death, and the possibility of beginning anew. It soars with an elegance that speaks to the soul, embodying the hope that even in the darkest moments, there is the potential for transformation and growth. To understand the Huma's significance is to touch upon the deepest truths of existence. In Persian culture, it is often associated with the eternal flight of the soul, forever seeking, forever reaching towards something higher, something divine. The bird's perpetual motion symbolizes the cyclical nature of life, how every ending contains the seed of a new beginning. Just as the seasons change, so too does the soul evolve, learning from the past while ever moving forward into the unknown. The Huma's flight is not a simple journey across the sky, it is a profound movement toward enlightenment, a quest for spiritual fulfillment that knows no end. In this sense, the Huma is often seen as a metaphor for the soul's quest for rebirth. When a person is touched by the Huma's shadow or blessed by its feather, it is said to mark the beginning of a new phase in their life. This transformation is not just external but internal, an awakening of the heart and mind to the deeper mysteries of existence. Those touched by the Huma are believed to be granted a second chance, an opportunity to shed old wounds and rise from the ashes of their past mistakes, just as the phoenix rises from its own ashes to be born anew. This symbolism of rebirth is not merely abstract, but is deeply woven into the cultural and spiritual fabric of Persian society. The Huma's ability to bestow fortune is inextricably linked with the idea that grace can be earned, that through acts of kindness, selflessness, and devotion, one can earn the divine favor of transformation. Yet, this grace is not given lightly. The Huma's touch is fleeting, its blessings temporary, reminding us that even the most miraculous changes come at a cost. One must be willing to sacrifice the old self to embrace the new, just as a bird must shed its feathers to grow and take flight again. In Sufi teachings, this idea of shedding the old self to embrace the divine is central. The Huma represents the soul's journey toward unity with the divine, where every flight of the bird is a metaphor for the soul's ascent toward greater understanding and enlightenment. The process of spiritual rebirth is not easy. It requires letting go of ego, desires, and attachments. In this sense, the Huma is not just a symbol of grace, but of the grace that comes from surrender, the ability to release the self and merge with something greater. It is only through this surrender that true spiritual rebirth can occur. The bird's symbolism extends into Persian literature and art, where it serves as a powerful reminder of the transient nature of life. To chase after fortune, love, or fame is to pursue something that, like the Huma's flight, is always just beyond one's reach. Yet in this pursuit, there is beauty and growth. The Huma, in its constant search, shows us that the journey itself is where meaning lies, not in the final destination. It is in the striving that we find our true selves, constantly evolving, constantly learning. Just as the Huma never lands, so too must we continue to evolve, never settling for the past, but always moving towards something higher. In art, the Huma often appears in delicate representations, its feathers shimmering with ethereal light, its wings spread wide in a gesture of welcome, of promise. It is depicted with grace and beauty, never in haste, always moving at its own pace, as if to remind us that the process of rebirth is not one of rush or force, but of quiet transformation. The bird's image is frequently paired with symbols of nature, the stars, the moon, the earth, showing the interconnectedness of all things, how the cycles of life are mirrored in the universe itself. Culturally, the Huma's symbolism reaches beyond personal transformation to reflect societal values. In times of struggle or despair, the bird represents hope, the belief that even after great loss, there is always the potential for renewal. The Huma's flight carries with it the message that grace is available to all, but only those who are open to receiving it can experience the beauty of rebirth. It is a symbol that transcends personal transformation, extending into the collective consciousness of a people, reminding them that even in the face of adversity, there is always the possibility for redemption. And as the Huma disappears into the distance, its flight fading against the horizon, the promise of its return lingers in the air. For the Huma's journey is not a one-time event, it is eternal. The bird's wings, once again, will beat through the skies, bringing with them the possibility of rebirth, of grace, and of the ever-present hope that no matter how lost or broken we may feel, there is always the chance to rise once more. Yet as the Huma's flight becomes a distant memory, another force emerges from the heavens, ready to share in the celestial dance of transformation. It is the phoenix, whose flames rise in tandem with the Huma's song of renewal, illuminating the path for those who dare to follow. In the world of contemporary art and philosophy, the Huma bird continues to soar as a symbol of grace, transcendence, and the eternal struggle for spiritual and personal transformation. Though the physical world may change, the symbolic weight of the Huma remains untouched, its wings ever spreading across the canvas of modern thought. Artists and philosophers, in their quest to understand the human condition, have turned to the ancient symbol of the Huma to express the timeless struggle for meaning, self-realization, and the pursuit of higher truths. Modern art, with its ever-evolving forms and techniques, finds a natural ally in the image of the Huma. The bird's flight across the vast, open sky, never bound to any single place, mirrors the restless nature of human creativity. In a world where boundaries seem to dissolve in the face of rapid technological advancement and cultural change, the Huma's symbolism offers a grounding point, an emblem of freedom and possibility. It represents the ideal that art, like the bird, must remain untethered, ever reaching for the infinite potential that lies just beyond our grasp. Contemporary artists, inspired by Persian myths and symbols, often incorporate the Huma's figure into their work, reinterpreting it for the modern world. In visual art, the bird is rendered in bold strokes, its wings spread in defiance of the constraints of time and space. Through mixed media and abstract forms, the Huma comes to life once again, its ethereal nature captured through colors that seem to float off the canvas, inviting viewers to reflect on their own personal journeys of transformation. The bird's representation in art is not confined to a singular form, it morphs, shifts, and evolves with the artist's vision, just as the concept of rebirth remains fluid and adaptable in the modern consciousness. The Huma's imagery is not only confined to the brushstrokes of visual art, but also flows through the words of contemporary poets and writers. Modern literature often employs the Huma as a symbol of aspiration, of the search for meaning in a world that feels increasingly disconnected. Just as the Sufi poets of the past used the Huma as a metaphor for the soul's pursuit of divine truth, modern poets similarly turn to the bird as a symbol of the relentless search for self-actualization and enlightenment. In this context, the Huma represents the longing for something greater, a spiritual yearning that transcends the confines of the material world. In contemporary philosophy, the Huma has found a place as a powerful metaphor for the individual's struggle to overcome the limitations of the ego and embrace a higher form of existence. Philosophers today often speak of the need to transcend the self, to release the attachments that bind us to our narrow, ego-driven perspectives and open ourselves to the vast, infinite potential that lies within and around us. In these philosophical conversations, the Huma's flight becomes a metaphor for the soul's journey toward enlightenment, a journey that requires both surrender and transformation. It is a process of letting go of old patterns of thinking, much as the Huma must shed its old feathers to soar higher. But the Huma is not simply a symbol of personal transformation. In the modern world, where environmental destruction, social unrest, and political upheaval are prevalent, the Huma's image is often invoked as a reminder of the need for collective renewal. Just as the bird is a harbinger of grace and fortune, its symbolic flight serves as a call to humanity to embrace a higher vision of unity and collective well-being. In a time when the world seems fragmented and divided, the Huma offers a vision of hope, a reminder that, like the bird soaring above the chaos, we too can rise above the divisions that separate us and move toward a more harmonious existence. Philosophers in the modern era draw on the symbolism of the Huma to explore the idea of human potential, how, through growth and self-awareness, individuals can transcend the limitations of their circumstances and rise to meet their highest aspirations. The Huma becomes a guide, a model for those who dare to question the nature of reality and pursue a life of deeper meaning. In this philosophical landscape, the bird's flight is not just a metaphor for spiritual awakening, but for the human potential to break free from the confines of a materialistic world and reach for something transcendent. Moreover, the Huma serves as an emblem of resilience in modern art and philosophy. In a world often marked by uncertainty and suffering, the bird's eternal flight reminds us of the possibility for renewal. It reflects the inner strength of the human spirit, the ability to rise from the ashes of hardship and adversity. Artists and philosophers alike use the Huma as a symbol of hope, a sign that even in our darkest moments, there is the potential for a new beginning, for a rebirth of the soul. And as the Huma continues to inspire in the worlds of art and philosophy, its legacy grows, not just as a symbol of ancient wisdom but as a beacon for contemporary thought. In a society increasingly focused on the transient, the material, and the immediate, the Huma stands as a reminder of the eternal, the spiritual, and the profound. It calls us to rise, to seek higher truths, and to embrace the grace and beauty of transformation. As artists paint its wings and philosophers reflect on its flight, the Huma lives on, urging us to soar toward something greater than ourselves. And as the wings of the Huma beat through the air, another force stirs beneath the surface, its fiery counterpart, the phoenix, awaiting its turn to share in the eternal dance of rebirth. In the shadows of ancient Persian mythology, the Paris were once known as mischievous, troublesome spirits, creatures that reveled in mischief and played tricks on humans. But as centuries passed and the cultural landscape shifted, so too did the Paris role within the spiritual and religious spheres. From the early Zoroastrian texts, where they were seen as fallen beings, to their later representation in Islamic tradition, the Paris transformation reflects a deeper change in how humanity viewed the forces of good and evil. They went from embodying chaos and discord to becoming symbols of grace, beauty, and divine favor. In Zoroastrianism, the Paris were initially described as spirits of the air, often aligned with Ahriman, the spirit of darkness and evil. In these early narratives, they were portrayed as seductive temptresses who sought to lead humans astray. They were seen as forces of disarray, stirring trouble in the balance of the cosmos. Much like the wicked jinn in later Islamic traditions, Paris were mischievous and wild, defying the order of the divine realm and causing havoc for mortals. They were not evil in the sense of being purely malevolent, but they were certainly a force to be reckoned with, entities that disrupted the divine harmony established by Ahura Mazda, the supreme god in Zoroastrianism. Yet, as Zoroastrianism evolved and its theological concepts matured, the portrayal of the Paris began to shift. The idea that all spirits, even those once considered impure or chaotic, could ultimately seek redemption found its way into Zoroastrian beliefs. Over time, the Paris came to be seen less as wicked agents of discord and more as misunderstood beings, capable of transformation and growth. They represented a potent symbol of the struggle for redemption and the possibility of change, a theme that would resonate deeply in the Islamic tradition that followed. When Islam spread across Persia, the Paris character underwent a profound transformation. While the term Pari continued to be used to refer to supernatural beings in Persian folklore, their role within the Islamic context took on a new dimension. In Islamic thought, the concept of angels and jinn became central to spiritual discussions, and it was within this framework that the Paris were reinterpreted. Islamic traditions depicted Paris as beautiful, ethereal beings who, while initially flawed, had the potential for grace and benevolence. In contrast to their earlier portrayal as mischievous spirits, the Paris became figures that could transcend their past and embody divine beauty and goodness. They were seen as protectors, guardians of the righteous, and messengers of the divine. They were no longer creatures that led humans astray, but rather beings who sought to guide the faithful toward the light of Allah. This transformation can be seen in the stories of the Paris and Sufi mysticism, where they often take on roles of spiritual guides, offering wisdom and insight to those on the path of enlightenment. In these traditions, Paris are viewed as beings caught between the realms of the divine and the mortal. They are beautiful and radiant, but their beauty is no longer a source of temptation. Instead, it is a reflection of their inner purity, their spiritual wisdom, and their capacity to bring healing to the souls of those they encounter. In some stories, the Paris are depicted as beings who, after falling from grace, seek redemption by serving humanity. They are no longer embodiments of chaos, but rather forces of healing and divine intervention. In this light, the Paris become symbols of the possibility of spiritual rebirth and redemption, reminders that even those who have faltered can rise again, purified and renewed. The transition from mischief to benevolence reflects the wider themes in Islamic thought about forgiveness, transformation, and the boundless mercy of Allah. One of the most notable representations of the Paris in Persian literature is in the works of poets such as Hafiz and Sa'di. In their writings, Paris are often portrayed as figures of extraordinary beauty, wisdom, and grace. Hafiz, for example, writes of Paris as beings who offer spiritual gifts and blessings to those who are worthy. These Paris are not the tricksters of old, but rather figures who embody divine favor, guiding the seeker on their journey toward enlightenment. They are, in a sense, intermediaries between the human and the divine, helping to bridge the gap between the material and the spiritual worlds. In the realm of Persian folklore, the Paris also appear as benevolent figures in stories that celebrate love, beauty, and redemption. In many of these tales, the Paris are not the antagonists but the protectors of love and purity, intervening in moments of crisis to ensure that justice and virtue prevail. In these stories, they represent the idea that even in the darkest of times, beauty and goodness can emerge, and that redemption is possible for all beings, no matter their past. The Paris journey from mischief to benevolence reflects a deeper understanding of the complexities of human nature and the spiritual journey. Their transformation mirrors the broader themes of Islamic and Persian philosophy, that all beings, no matter their flaws or failings, have the potential for growth and change. The Paris redemption story offers hope that, through effort, grace, and the guidance of the divine, one can transcend their past and emerge as something purer, more virtuous, and more aligned with the divine. Today, the Paris continue to captivate the imagination, their legacy alive in the poetry, folklore, and spiritual teachings of the Persian world. Their transition from mischievous spirits to benevolent beings mirrors the human experience, the journey from ignorance and mistake to understanding and wisdom. As figures of grace, beauty, and divine favor, the Paris remind us that redemption is always within reach, and that no matter how far one has fallen, there is always the possibility of rising again. In the heart of ancient Persia, where the wind whispered through the trees and the stars gleamed like jewels in the night sky, the Paris were creatures of legend, their stories passed down through the generations in hushed tones and vivid tales. These were not just stories to be told around a fire, but sagas of love, sacrifice, redemption, and the unyielding pursuit of grace. With their radiant beauty and their otherworldly nature, the Paris inhabited a world that existed just beyond the veil of human understanding, where the boundaries between the divine and the mortal blurred into a mist of wonder and mystery. One of the most enduring stories of the Paris is that of the Pari Queen, a figure whose beauty was so dazzling, it could make the moon pale in comparison. In this legend, the Queen of the Paris falls in love with a mortal king, a man of exceptional wisdom and virtue. Their love, however, is not destined to last. The Queen of the Paris is forbidden to marry a human, for the laws of the heavens decree that such unions are impossible. But love, as it often does, knows no boundaries. The queen defies the divine edict, choosing love over duty, and secretly marries the king. For a time, their love flourishes, and the world around them seems to bloom with the warmth of their union. But as the years pass, the consequences of defying the heavens begin to take shape. The king, though noble, grows weary, his spirit fading. The queen, unable to bear the thought of losing him, begins to lose her own ethereal beauty, her wings losing their luster, her glow dimming with each passing day. Her beauty is no longer the celestial light it once was, for her heart is bound to a mortal, and the laws of the divine cannot be ignored forever. In her desperation, the Queen of the Paris pleads with the gods, begging for forgiveness, hoping to regain her lost radiance and save her beloved. It is said that the gods, moved by her devotion and love, grant her one final chance to prove the depth of her love by making the ultimate sacrifice. The queen is told that if she gives up her immortality, her wings, and her place among the Paris, she will be allowed to stay by the king's side, though she will live out her days as a mortal. Without hesitation, the queen accepts the challenge. She sheds her divine nature, casting off her wings and all that made her a Pari. Her beauty, once beyond compare, fades into the mortal realm. But the love she shares with the king is eternal, and her selfless act of sacrifice is rewarded. In the end, she and the king live out their lives together, bound by love and the knowledge that true beauty lies not in the outer form but in the purity of the heart. This story, though filled with heartbreak, also speaks to the enduring power of love and sacrifice. It is a tale of how the Paris, once seen as mischievous beings, were capable of great acts of devotion and selflessness. In this narrative, the Paris are not just beings of ethereal beauty, they are creatures of depth and complexity, capable of both great love and great loss. Another well-known tale involves a Pari who, in a moment of reckless defiance, falls from grace. This Pari, unlike the queen, was not driven by love, but by arrogance and pride. She believed herself to be above the laws of the heavens, and so she sought to prove her power by challenging the gods themselves. But the gods, wise and just, did not tolerate such arrogance. In punishment, the Pari is cast down to the mortal world, where she must live among humans, stripped of her wings and her divine beauty. In her time among humans, the Pari learns humility and the true nature of beauty. She is no longer the dazzling, untouchable creature she once was. Instead, she walks among mortals, feeling their pain, their struggles, and their joys. Over time, she comes to understand that beauty is not about appearance, but about the strength of the heart and the purity of the soul. She learns that true grace is not something bestowed from above, but something that must be earned through compassion, kindness, and selflessness. Eventually, the Pari's transformation is complete. She is allowed to return to the realm of the Paris, but she is no longer the same being she once was. Her wings have returned, but they are different now, more graceful, more elegant, and imbued with the wisdom of her experiences in the mortal world. In this story, the Pari represents the journey of self-discovery, the path from arrogance to humility, from superficiality to true beauty. The Paris are also featured in tales where they serve as guardians, protectors of the innocent, and healers of the wounded. In one such story, a Pari is sent to aid a young prince who has been struck by a deadly illness. The prince's family, desperate to save him, turns to the Pari for help. The Pari, with her healing touch, is able to cure the prince, but not without a cost. In exchange for her aid, she asks for a single moment of peace, a brief respite from the endless duties and responsibilities that weigh heavily on her kind. The prince's family, recognizing the Pari's sacrifice, grants her request, and in that moment, the Pari finds a fleeting sense of solace. These stories of the Paris illustrate the transformative power of love, sacrifice, and redemption. Once viewed as figures of mischief and rebellion, the Paris have evolved into symbols of grace, beauty, and the potential for growth. Their legends, rich with emotion and timeless wisdom, continue to inspire and captivate those who hear them. The Paris remind us that even the most mischievous beings can change, and that within each of us lies the potential for redemption, grace, and the transformation of the soul. In the ancient stories and poems of Persia, the Paris were not merely seen as mystical creatures, but as embodiments of something far greater: light, beauty, and divine radiance. Their very presence in the world was a symbol of the divine, their ethereal beauty a reflection of something pure and otherworldly. But this beauty was never meant to be shallow or merely aesthetic. It carried a deeper, spiritual significance. The Paris light was not just a physical glow, but a symbol of enlightenment, the pursuit of truth, and the eternal search for grace. From the earliest Zoroastrian texts to later Islamic poetry, the image of the Paris, with their radiant wings and dazzling allure, served as a reminder of the higher realms, the world beyond human understanding. Their beauty was seen as a bridge between the mortal and the divine, a reminder that there is more to existence than what the eye can see. In this sense, the Paris represented not only the ideal of physical beauty but also the spiritual beauty that lies within every soul. In the world of Persian poetry, beauty was always more than a mere surface quality. It was tied to the soul, to the divine connection between the individual and the infinite. Poets like Hafez, Sa'di, and Rumi often invoked the Paris as metaphors for the search for inner beauty, truth, and enlightenment. The Pari's light was the light of the soul, a manifestation of the divine spark that resided within all beings. Just as the Paris beauty illuminated the darkness of the heavens, so too could the human soul be illuminated by the light of divine love and wisdom. But the symbolism of the Paris as light was not limited to their physical appearance. Their glow also represented something more transient, something deeper and more profound. The Paris, as beings of light, embodied the fleeting nature of beauty. Their radiance was not permanent, for it was always subject to the will of the divine. This aspect of the Paris symbolism speaks to the impermanence of all things, a theme that is deeply embedded in Persian mysticism and philosophy. Just as the Paris beauty could fade or be altered, so too could the material world and all its trappings. True beauty, the Paris seemed to say, was not to be found in the fleeting, the physical, but in the eternal and the spiritual. The Paris beauty and light were also intertwined with themes of redemption and transformation. In many stories, the Paris begin as beings who are lost, whether through their own misdeeds or by their inability to fully embody their divine nature. But over time, they undergo a process of spiritual growth, shedding their former selves in order to become more enlightened. In this sense, the Paris radiance is not static but is the result of their inner journey toward spiritual purity. Their light represents the possibility of change, of transformation from darkness to light, from ignorance to wisdom. This transformation, symbolized by their glowing wings and radiant forms, is also a reminder of the power of grace. In Persian tradition, grace is not something that can be earned or acquired, it is something that must be given, a gift from the divine. The Paris beauty, their light, is a manifestation of this grace. They do not possess it because of their own merit, but because they have been chosen by the divine to embody its purity. Their beauty is a gift, a reminder that all beauty, whether physical or spiritual, is a reflection of the divine grace that sustains the universe. The Paris, in their role as symbols of beauty and light, also remind us of the dual nature of existence. They are not just radiant figures of perfection, but creatures who are deeply connected to both the celestial and the earthly realms. While they represent the highest ideals of beauty and grace, they are also beings who are subject to the same forces that govern the world of mortals. This duality makes the Paris especially powerful as symbols, for they are not unattainable or beyond reach. They embody the possibility that, even in the midst of the ordinary and the flawed, there is the potential for beauty, grace, and light. The Paris light also serves as a beacon of hope. In a world often overshadowed by suffering and despair, their glow reminds us that there is always the possibility of something better, something more beautiful. Their light shines through the darkness, guiding those who are lost or searching for meaning. They represent the eternal truth that, no matter how dark the world may seem, there is always the potential for illumination, for enlightenment, and for beauty to emerge from the shadows. In the stories of the Paris, their light is often depicted as a source of healing. In one tale, a Pari descends from the heavens to aid a suffering mortal, her light enveloping him and curing his ailments. The healing power of the Pari's light speaks to the restorative nature of beauty and grace. It suggests that beauty, in its purest form, has the power to heal, to soothe, and to bring peace to troubled souls. The Paris, in this sense, are not just beautiful beings, they are healers, bearers of divine light who offer solace to those in need. As symbols of light and beauty, the Paris also represent the ideals of purity and divine love. In Persian literature, they are often described as the embodiments of perfect love, not love that is selfish or possessive, but a love that is selfless, boundless, and pure. Their light shines as a reflection of this love, illuminating the hearts of those who are worthy of it. In many ways, the Paris beauty is a reflection of the love that exists within the divine, a love that transcends the material world and connects all beings in a web of radiant light. The symbolism of the Paris as light and beauty continues to resonate in modern culture, where the pursuit of beauty, both physical and spiritual, remains a central theme in art, literature, and philosophy. The Paris, in all their radiance, remind us that true beauty is not about appearance or superficial allure, but about the light that shines within, the love and grace that flow from the soul. Their light is a beacon, guiding us toward a deeper understanding of beauty and its transformative power. Through their stories, the Paris teach us that beauty, in its purest form, is not something we possess, but something we give, something that flows from the divine and illuminates the world around us. Throughout the ages, the Paris have captivated the imagination of artists and poets alike. These ethereal beings, often depicted as radiant and otherworldly, have served as symbols of beauty, grace, and divine light. Their portrayals in art and literature have not only reflected their cultural significance, but have also imbued them with layers of meaning that continue to resonate with audiences today. In the vibrant tapestry of Persian art and literature, the Paris occupy a place of reverence, their depictions offering glimpses into the spiritual and emotional landscapes of the past. In Persian art, the Paris are often shown as ethereal, winged beings, their forms delicately rendered to emphasize their supernatural beauty. Their wings, often depicted as translucent and iridescent, convey a sense of lightness and otherworldliness, as though they are not bound by the same physical laws that govern mortals. Their faces are frequently described as serene, their eyes glowing with a wisdom and grace that seem beyond human comprehension. Artists would capture their graceful postures, often in flight or poised in moments of contemplation, with a sense of motion that suggests their connection to the divine. One of the most iconic depictions of the Paris can be found in Persian miniature paintings, where these mythical beings are brought to life in intricate, vibrant detail. In these artworks, the Paris often appear in scenes of heavenly landscapes or celestial gardens, surrounded by lush flora and shimmering light. The settings in which they are depicted, gardens, palaces, and heavenly realms, are lush with symbolism, reflecting the Paris association with beauty, peace, and divine favor. In these miniature paintings, the Paris are not just figures of grace, but are also portrayed as messengers of the divine, bearers of a light that illuminates the path to spiritual enlightenment. In some pieces, the Paris are shown interacting with mortals, often extending a hand of kindness or healing. These scenes emphasize their role as intermediaries between the divine and the earthly realms. The Paris, though otherworldly, are not distant or aloof. Instead, they are depicted as beings who care for humanity, offering guidance and protection. Their beauty is not just for admiration, but is a vehicle for their higher purpose, helping mortals in times of need or offering blessings of love and wisdom. Poetry, too, has been a powerful medium through which the Paris have been immortalized. Persian poets, such as Hafiz, Sa'di, and Rumi, often invoke the image of the Paris in their verses to explore themes of love, beauty, and spiritual longing. In their poems, the Paris are not just physical beings, but representations of divine love, wisdom, and light. Their beauty is transcendent, a reflection of the eternal and the divine, and through their symbolic presence, poets sought to convey deeper truths about the human soul. One of the most famous mentions of Paris in Persian literature appears in the works of Hafiz. In his poetry, the Paris are often described as celestial beings who represent the purity and grace that humans strive for but cannot fully attain. Hafiz used the image of the Pari to express the elusive nature of spiritual perfection and the longing for the divine. In his verses, the Paris serve as a metaphor for the soul's yearning for union with the divine, a reminder that true beauty is found not in the material world but in the spiritual realm. Rumi, too, invoked the Paris in his mystical poetry. For Rumi, the Paris were symbols of the divine beauty that transcends human understanding. They were not merely figures of desire or temptation, but represented the highest ideals of love and devotion. In Rumi's world, the Paris were beings whose beauty was a reflection of the divine love that sustains the universe. Through their depictions, Rumi sought to convey the idea that love, in its purest form, is the greatest force in the universe, capable of transforming the soul and bringing it closer to the divine. Sa'di's works, too, are rich with references to the Paris, often using them as symbols of spiritual awakening and enlightenment. In his stories, the Paris are sometimes depicted as messengers who bring wisdom and guidance to those who seek it. In these tales, the Paris represent the inner light that guides the seeker on their journey toward spiritual fulfillment. Their beauty, then, is not just external but reflects the wisdom and grace that come from within. Beyond the classical poets, the Paris have also appeared in the works of modern Persian authors and artists. Contemporary writers have continued to draw on the rich symbolism of the Paris, using them as metaphors for the search for beauty, truth, and spiritual meaning in a modern world that often seems disconnected from the divine. The Paris have been used as symbols of the quest for inner peace, the longing for transcendence, and the search for a deeper connection to the universe. In modern art, the Paris are sometimes reimagined in more abstract forms, their radiant light and beauty conveyed through color, shape, and texture rather than realistic depictions. Yet, in these modern interpretations, the essence of the Paris remains unchanged, a symbol of divine grace and the eternal search for truth. In the world of Persian folk literature, the Paris are often depicted in tales that explore the interplay between the human and the divine. These stories highlight the Paris' ability to bridge the gap between the mortal and celestial worlds, offering a glimpse into the spiritual realm while remaining deeply connected to the human experience. In these tales, the Paris are often portrayed as figures of kindness and compassion, helping mortals in times of need or offering them divine wisdom. Their beauty and grace are not just qualities to be admired, but qualities that inspire humans to reach for something higher, to seek beauty and goodness in their own lives. The depiction of the Paris in art and literature serves as a powerful reminder of the enduring human desire for beauty, wisdom, and spiritual fulfillment. These stories and images of the Paris capture the imagination and offer a window into the mystical world of Persian mythology, where beauty and grace are not just ideals but pathways to deeper understanding. Whether in the delicate brushstrokes of a miniature painting or the verses of a poem, the Paris continue to inspire and evoke a sense of wonder, a reminder that, even in a world filled with darkness, there is always light to be found, and that beauty, in its truest form, is both a gift and a guiding force on the journey toward the divine. In the earliest whispers of Persian mythology, long before the mighty kings and divine heroes carved their names into the annals of history, there existed the Daevas, shadowy beings who stood in opposition to the gods, embodiments of chaos and destruction. Their origin is as murky and complex as the very forces they represent. But one thing is certain, Daevas are more than mere creatures of darkness. They are symbols of the eternal struggle between light and dark, order and chaos, good and evil. The origins of the Daevas are deeply rooted in the ancient Zoroastrian worldview. In this cosmology, the universe is a battlefield, with two great forces in constant conflict, Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of light and wisdom, and Ingramenu, the evil spirit of darkness and deceit. It is in this cosmic struggle that the Daevas find their place. They are the followers of Ingramenu, the physical and spiritual manifestations of his malice. Unlike the divine beings, who were created in the image of goodness, the Daevas were born of corruption, born to disrupt and destroy. In the Zoroastrian texts, particularly the Avesta, the Daevas are described as malevolent spirits who seek to deceive humanity, sow discord, and lead mortals astray. They are not simply gods of misfortune, but embody the darker qualities of the human soul: hatred, pride, greed, and ignorance. The Daevas were created to challenge the divine order, to bring chaos into a world that was meant to be harmonious and just. They are the counterforce to the light, the ever-present shadow that threatens to engulf the world in its embrace. The name Div itself speaks to their nature. In its earliest usage, the term referred to any demonic or evil spirit, but over time, it came to represent a specific class of beings that were distinct from other malevolent creatures in Persian mythology. Daevas were not mere monsters or demons. They were intelligent, cunning, and insidious forces that sought to manipulate and corrupt. They were the deceivers, the seducers, the whisperers of lies who would often take on the guise of something beautiful or enticing, only to reveal their true nature when it was too late. One of the most well-known Daevas in Persian mythology is Ahriman, also known as Ingramenu, the supreme evil spirit who stands at the helm of the Daevas' dark forces. In many ways, Ahriman is the embodiment of evil itself, the force that opposes all that is good and pure. His goal is simple: to destroy the divine order and corrupt creation. However, Ahriman's influence is not always direct. Instead, he sends his legions of Daevas to carry out his will, to undermine the work of Ahura Mazda and his divine helpers. Ahriman's nature is the complete antithesis of Ahura Mazda's. While Ahura Mazda embodies truth, wisdom, and goodness, Ahriman represents lies, deceit, and destruction. But while Ahura Mazda's power is infinite and unyielding, Ahriman's strength is limited. The very nature of evil is self-destructive. It can never truly create or sustain life, only corrupt and destroy what already exists. And so, the Daevas, as Ahriman's instruments, are always doomed to failure, always in a perpetual state of decay and disintegration. Yet, despite their inherent weaknesses, the Daevas are a powerful force. They often appear in human form, seeking to influence the hearts and minds of mortals. Through their cunning, they plant seeds of doubt and fear, turning people against each other, making them vulnerable to corruption. They are the temptations, the false promises, the voices in the dark that lure mortals into sin. In this way, the Daevas serve as a reminder of the fragility of human nature. They represent the internal struggles that every individual faces, the temptation to abandon truth for convenience, to choose ignorance over wisdom, and to give in to the darker impulses that reside within the soul. In the epic poem, the Shahnameh, the Daevas take on even more sinister roles. They are depicted as powerful adversaries to the Persian heroes, their dark influence felt in every battle, every war, and every moment of strife. The hero of the Shahnameh, Rostam, faces off against the Daevas on multiple occasions, each time confronting not just physical adversaries, but also the internal battles that come with their dark influence. In these epic struggles, the Daevas are often portrayed as formidable, almost invincible forces, but they are always defeated in the end. Their defeat is symbolic, not just of the triumph of good over evil, but of the hope that, despite the forces of darkness, light will always prevail. The Daevas' role in Persian mythology, however, is not solely to be vanquished. They serve an essential function in the grand cosmic narrative. Without the Daevas, there could be no heroes, no struggle, no growth. The battle between the forces of light and darkness is what drives the universe forward, and the Daevas, as agents of chaos, help to highlight the virtues of order, truth, and righteousness. Through their actions, they expose the flaws in the human condition, allowing mortals to strive for a higher moral and spiritual purpose. As much as the Daevas are evil in nature, they are also essential to the development of human consciousness and morality. In many ways, they represent the forces within the human psyche that must be confronted and overcome. The constant struggle against the Daevas is symbolic of the struggle against the darker aspects of the self. It is only through recognizing and defeating these inner Daevas, fear, anger, hatred, and ignorance, that one can achieve true spiritual growth and enlightenment. The presence of the Daevas in Persian mythology also speaks to the idea of dualism, a theme that runs deep in Zoroastrian thought. In the Zoroastrian worldview, there are two opposing forces, Ahura Mazda, the god of light, and Ingramenu, the spirit of darkness. These two forces are not equal, for light is eternal and unchanging, while darkness is fleeting and self-destructive. But their constant clash is what shapes the world, and the Daevas, as extensions of Ingramenu's will, are central to this cosmic battle. In this light, the Daevas become more than just malevolent spirits. They are agents of the necessary tension between order and chaos, between creation and destruction. They are forces that compel mortals to act, to choose sides, and to engage in the eternal struggle that defines existence. In their opposition to the gods, the Daevas reflect the inner conflict that exists in all of us, the ongoing battle between our higher selves and our baser instincts. And in this conflict, the fate of the world, and of the soul, hangs in the balance. The battle between the forces of light and darkness is as old as time itself. In the rich tapestry of Persian mythology, some of the most compelling tales are those that tell of the great heroes who faced the Daevas in epic struggles that would determine the fate of the world. These battles, filled with courage, sacrifice, and the eternal struggle between good and evil, transcend mere combat. They are symbolic of the human struggle against the darker forces within the self, forces that threaten to engulf not only individuals but entire civilizations. One of the most famous and pivotal battles in Persian mythology occurs between the mighty hero Feridun and the treacherous Zahak, a king who had been possessed by the dark forces of the Daevas. Zahak, once a man of promise, had fallen victim to the wiles of the Daevas, who had promised him immortality in exchange for his soul. Under their malevolent influence, Zahak became a tyrant, ruling with cruelty and spreading suffering across the land. His reign was marked by fear, as two snakes grew from his shoulders, demanding the flesh of young men to be sacrificed to them every day. Feridun, the noble son of Aptin, rose as a beacon of hope for a world consumed by darkness. His battle against Zahak was not just one of physical strength, but also one of moral righteousness. Feridun was a man of justice, a hero chosen by the gods to restore order to a land ravaged by tyranny. The battle between Feridun and Zahak was a clash of ideals, the righteousness of Feridun against the corruption of Zahak. It was a war for the soul of the land itself. The moment Feridun confronted Zahak was one of intense emotion, for it was not just a battle between two men but a battle for the future of Persia. As the two warriors met on the field of battle, the air was thick with the tension of what was at stake. Zahak, with his dark magic and monstrous appearance, was a formidable foe, his snakes hissing as they writhed on his shoulders. But Feridun, armed with the power of the divine, stood resolute, his heart pure with the knowledge that he fought not for personal gain but for the freedom of his people. In the fierce confrontation that followed, Feridun struck the decisive blow. He captured Zahak, chaining him to a mountain, where he would remain for eternity, a symbol of the defeat of tyranny. The victory over Zahak was not only a personal triumph for Feridun but a victory for all those who had suffered under Zahak's cruel reign. The light had triumphed over the darkness, but it came at a cost. The land was left scarred, and the battle had left its mark on Feridun as well. The victory, though sweet, was bittersweet, for it reminded all who witnessed it that the battle between good and evil is never truly over. Another iconic battle in Persian mythology is the story of the great hero Rostam, the mightiest warrior in the Persian epic Shahnameh. Rostam's battles against the Daevas are legendary, and his courage in the face of evil is the stuff of myth. One of the most memorable of these battles occurs when Rostam faces off against the Div of Deception, Ahriman's servant, in a contest that will decide the fate of a kingdom. The Div of Deception was a cunning creature, whose powers lay in his ability to manipulate minds and twist the truth. He was a creature of shadows, appearing in many forms, each more alluring than the last. He would speak in riddles, play with illusions, and attempt to ensnare Rostam in his webs of deceit. But Rostam, with his unyielding sense of honor and strength, was not so easily deceived. His battle with the Div of Deception was not fought with swords or weapons, but with the mind, as Rostam had to see through the Div's illusions and uncover the truth hidden beneath. As the two faced off, the Div tried to confuse Rostam with false promises and tricks, but Rostam remained steadfast, his heart true and his mind clear. It was not long before Rostam saw through the Div's illusions and struck him down, revealing the true nature of his deceit. The victory was a triumph not only of physical strength but of inner wisdom, showing that sometimes the greatest battles are fought within the mind and spirit. Rostam's victories over the Daevas were not just battles in the traditional sense, they were tests of character, courage, and resolve. Each battle he faced against the forces of darkness was a reflection of the internal struggles that every human being must face. The Daevas, with their cunning and deceit, were not just external enemies, they represented the fears, doubts, and temptations that every hero must confront within themselves. Rostam's greatest victory was not in the defeat of the Daevas, but in his ability to maintain his purity and honor despite the darkness that sought to corrupt him. Beyond Feridun and Rostam, there are countless other stories in Persian mythology of heroes who faced the Daevas in their many forms. From the wise and just kings who fought to protect their people to the humble mortals who rose to greatness in times of need, the Daevas were a constant presence in the lives of the Persian people. But in every tale, the heroes triumphed, often against overwhelming odds, because they were armed not just with weapons, but with the strength of character and the will to fight for what was right. These battles against the Daevas are more than just stories of good versus evil, they are symbolic of the eternal struggle within every human being. The Daevas represent the darker forces that seek to bring out the worst in us, the anger, the fear, the hatred, and the corruption. But the heroes of these myths, whether they were kings, warriors, or ordinary men, show that it is possible to rise above these forces, to conquer the darkness within, and to emerge victorious. The battles against the Daevas are timeless reminders that the fight between light and darkness is not just a cosmic struggle, but a deeply personal one. It is a struggle that each individual must face, for the greatest enemy is often not the external forces we battle, but the darkness within our own hearts. And in these stories, the heroes show us that no matter how great the darkness, the light of courage, honor, and righteousness will always shine through. In the heart of Persian mythology, Daevas are not just creatures of darkness, they are the embodiment of chaos, disorder, and destruction. They represent the forces that seek to dismantle the order of the world, to shatter the peace and harmony that once existed. Their very nature is to disrupt, to twist, and to corrupt, making them the antithesis of the divine forces that uphold the balance of the universe. The Daevas' role is not just to fight against gods and heroes, but to challenge the very concept of stability itself. At the core of their being, the Daevas are agents of change, though a destructive one. They are the untamed, uncontrollable forces of nature, the violent storms that sweep across the land, the sudden upheavals that strike without warning. Their presence signals an absence of structure, a loss of control. Where the divine forces of light and goodness are associated with creation and order, the Daevas are linked with ruin and disorder. In the Zoroastrian worldview, where the cosmic battle between Ahura Mazda and Ingramenu plays out, the Daevas are Ingramenu's tools, his very breath of malevolence. Daevas do not simply exist to create suffering, they seek to unravel the fabric of the world itself. They are the whispers that sow doubt in the hearts of the righteous, the shadows that cloud the minds of the wise. With every act of deception, they chip away at the foundation of truth, creating fractures that can spread and destroy the very essence of existence. In Persian mythology, the Daevas are often depicted as shapeshifters, constantly changing their forms in an attempt to confuse and mislead. This fluidity reflects their chaotic nature. There is no solidity in them, no consistency, only the constant flux of destruction. Perhaps the most striking symbol of the Daevas as agents of disorder is their relationship with the natural world. In many stories, they are not merely mythological creatures, but are tied directly to the elements that represent chaos. The Daevas are often associated with dark clouds, storms, and the forces that tear apart the earth. In ancient Persia, there were natural phenomena that could be interpreted as divine or supernatural interventions, storms that seemed to come out of nowhere, droughts that ravaged the land without warning. The Daevas, in their elemental forms, represent these unpredictable and destructive forces. They are the embodiment of nature's wrath, the uncontrolled fury of the earth and sky. The Daevas' ability to cause chaos extends beyond just physical destruction. In many myths, the Daevas represent the moral and spiritual disorder that can overtake individuals and entire societies. They are the forces that pull people away from the path of righteousness, leading them into sin and corruption. In stories of kings and heroes, the Daevas are often portrayed as the very temptations that seek to lead rulers astray, making them blind to the suffering they cause. The Daevas feed on the weaknesses of the soul, pride, greed, hatred, and fear, twisting these emotions into something unrecognizable. The moral collapse that follows is just as damaging as any physical devastation they could cause. Consider the story of Zahak, one of the most infamous figures in Persian mythology. Zahak's transformation from a once great ruler into a tyrant consumed by darkness is the perfect allegory for the chaos the Daevas can bring. Under the influence of the Daevas, Zahak becomes a puppet, his body infected by the sinister snakes that grew from his shoulders. These creatures, demanding the sacrifice of young lives, are not just symbols of death, but of the twisted desires that have overtaken Zahak's soul. His fall from grace represents the collapse of order within a ruler's mind, and by extension, within the kingdom itself. The Daevas corrupt his will, turning him into a tyrant who brings suffering to his people. Zahak's story is a vivid reminder of how disorder, whether internal or external, can tear apart the very essence of what makes a person, or a kingdom, whole. The concept of chaos is also reflected in the way the Daevas spread lies and deception. They are masters of manipulation, using deceit as a weapon to spread confusion and mistrust. Their lies are not just simple falsehoods, they are twisted truths designed to weaken the resolve of the strong and to confuse the wise. In Persian mythology, the Daevas often appear in the guise of beautiful or alluring figures, only to reveal their true, horrific nature once they have ensnared their victim. This deceptive nature speaks to their role as instigators of spiritual chaos. It is not enough for them to simply destroy, they must first confuse, corrupt, and mislead. In this way, they mirror the darker aspects of human nature, the temptation to act in self-interest, to deceive, and to create disorder within one's own heart. But the Daevas are not invincible. Though they are the force of chaos and disruption, they are constantly at odds with the divine forces that uphold order and truth. Their chaotic nature, though powerful, is inherently self-destructive. In the Persian worldview, chaos cannot last forever. Even the most powerful Daevas, like Ingramenu himself, are ultimately doomed to fail because they lack the inherent stability and harmony of Ahura Mazda and his divine creations. The Daevas' actions, though often successful in the short term, are doomed to backfire, as they can never fully conquer the forces of order and wisdom. In this sense, the Daevas are a necessary part of the cosmic balance. They represent the eternal tension between order and chaos, the yin and yang of existence. Without chaos, there would be no need for order. Without darkness, there would be no light. The Daevas are the chaos that allows the divine to shine even brighter, as heroes like Feridun, Rostam, and other figures in Persian mythology are able to rise and triumph over them. They are the challenge, the obstacle that the forces of good must face in order to prove their worth. In this way, the Daevas are essential to the stories of the heroes who stand against them. In the end, the Daevas are not simply creatures of malice and evil. They are the symbols of the chaos that exists within the universe and within every human heart. They represent the forces of disorder that constantly threaten to undo the work of creation. But just as in the ancient tales, the Daevas are defeated time and time again. Their destruction is a reminder that while chaos may always exist, order, truth, and goodness will always rise to restore balance in the end. And even in the darkest of times, the light will always find a way to shine through. Once, the Daevas were feared and reviled as the embodiment of chaos and corruption, their very presence an omen of doom. They were the physical manifestation of everything that was wrong with the world: deceit, destruction, and darkness. Ancient Persians saw them as tangible threats, forces of evil that could bring down entire civilizations, disrupt families, and tear apart the delicate fabric of society. Their role was simple: to create disorder, to corrupt and twist, to bring about the downfall of heroes and kings. But over time, the Daevas' meaning, their role in Persian culture and in mythology, began to shift. As centuries passed and the world around them evolved, so too did the perception of these ancient creatures. It's almost impossible to ignore the way the Daevas were viewed in different times, different settings, and by different generations. Early on, they were a clear and present danger, creatures of monstrous power who threatened everything the ancient Persians held dear: order, purity, and the divine light of Ahura Mazda. They were the enemies of the righteous, the forces that sought to pull everything back into the primordial chaos that existed before creation. The fight against them was a righteous war of survival, where the heavens themselves seemed to weigh in on the side of the heroes. But as Persian culture evolved, particularly as Zoroastrianism began to lose its dominance and other religious and philosophical ideas started to take root, the Daevas began to be understood in a new light. They were no longer just the physical enemies of the divine, but became representations of more abstract concepts, inner turmoil, moral failings, and the temptations that lie within each person. The concept of the Daevas began to transcend the realm of myth and entered the realm of human psychology and morality. This shift was a slow process, but it was marked by one significant change. The Daevas, once seen purely as external forces of destruction, began to be recognized as reflections of the human soul's darker inclinations. They no longer existed solely as monstrous beings lurking in the corners of the earth or waiting to corrupt the minds of kings. Instead, they started to represent the darker aspects of the human psyche, the greed, the jealousy, the rage, the fear that exists in every person. The Daevas became internalized, reflecting the struggles within a person's heart and mind. In the epic Shahnameh, the image of the Daevas began to soften in some retellings. The heroes who fought them no longer simply crushed them with brute force or divine intervention. Instead, their battles with the Daevas often took on a more nuanced approach, revealing the struggle between inner virtue and temptation. Rostam, one of the most celebrated heroes, faced the Daevas not just in battle but in tests of character, patience, and wisdom. These mythological battles, fought on the battlefield of the mind, reflected a shift in how the Persian people began to view the forces of chaos. The Daevas were no longer just something external to fear, they were something one could confront within oneself. This change in perception continued throughout the centuries, especially in the wake of the rise of Islamic influence over the Persian Empire. As Islam took root, the concept of good versus evil was redefined. The moral and spiritual battle against the forces of darkness became less about the literal battle against monstrous beings and more about the internal spiritual struggle each individual faced. The Daevas began to take on a more metaphorical role, representing the devils within, the whisperings of evil thoughts and actions that could lead someone astray from the righteous path. In many Islamic retellings of Persian myths, the Daevas became less of a physical threat and more of a metaphor for the constant internal struggle against sin. They were no longer seen as monsters that could physically destroy a person, but as the temptation to do wrong, the voice that encouraged bad decisions, or the inner voice of doubt that could cloud judgment. They mirrored the struggle of every believer against their own weaknesses, doubts, and vices. The Daevas, in this new light, became symbols of spiritual trials, not just physical dangers. This shift in how the Daevas were perceived was also reflected in the art and literature of the time. While the earlier works depicted the Daevas as fearsome, monstrous creatures engaged in epic battles with gods and heroes, the later works took on a more introspective tone. Artists began to depict the Daevas not only as physical beings, but also as ethereal, ghostly figures, representing fears, regrets, and internal battles. Their forms became less solid and more fluid, symbolizing how these forces of darkness were not confined to any one place or time, but existed within every individual's heart. Even as these perceptions changed, the Daevas' role in Persian mythology remained crucial. They were, in a way, the dark counterpoint to the divine order. In their ever-changing forms, they reflected the chaos and disorder that are part of the human experience. Whether external or internal, the battle against them was one that each person had to face in their own way. The struggle against the Daevas became a personal one that echoed throughout the stories of Persian heroes, and it reflected the timeless truth that everyone has a battle within them. The shifting perception of the Daevas also mirrored the changes in Persian society and culture. As Persia transitioned from a world shaped by ancient Zoroastrianism to one influenced by Islam and, later, modernity, the Daevas transformed from simple evil beings to complex symbols of the internal conflicts humans face. They came to represent not only the external forces of darkness and disorder, but also the internal struggles that everyone must confront. Through all these changes, one thing remained constant: the Daevas were the forces of chaos, always lurking, always trying to pull people away from the path of light and order. Whether in their ancient monstrous forms or as metaphors for inner conflict, the Daevas would always be a part of Persian mythology and, by extension, part of the human experience. Their story is not just one of myth, but a story of the struggle within every person, a struggle that continues to this day. And so, the changing perceptions of the Daevas reflect the ever-evolving nature of human understanding, the way we perceive good and evil, and the battles we fight within our own hearts. In the quiet, whispering winds of ancient Persia, there lived a creature both feared and revered, one whose presence in folklore carried with it a blend of mystery, mischief, and menace. Known as the owl, this enigmatic being was often depicted as a terrifying figure, a creature whose very essence seemed to disturb the peace of the night. The owl was no ordinary mythological being. It was a shadow that existed between the worlds of the living and the unseen, a force that could cross the threshold into human existence when least expected, leaving behind a trail of fear and chaos. But while its reputation was built on its terrifying power, there was always an air of ambiguity surrounding it. Was the owl a purely malevolent being, or was it a reflection of something deeper, something more complex that lay within the human soul? The owl was typically imagined as a monstrous, terrifying figure, sometimes described with the body of a grotesque beast, sometimes as a spectral presence that could shapeshift into a more human form, or even as a creature that resembled a demon in the most unsettling of ways. Its eyes were said to glow with a hellish light, and its voice was like a venomous whisper in the wind, always heard just before disaster struck. Its appearance could vary from one region of Persia to another, with some stories casting it as an invisible being who could possess or haunt its victims, while others painted it as a physical creature capable of creating havoc wherever it roamed. What made the owl truly unique, however, was its place in Persian folklore. It was not a creature bound to the mountains or the deep forests, like so many other mythical beings. No, the owl thrived in the places between, those areas that straddled the border between light and darkness, life and death, the known and the unknown. It was a trickster, a figure that existed in the shadows, just out of sight, waiting to strike when least expected. This made it not only a creature of terror, but a symbol of the fear of the unknown that lived within the human heart. According to legend, the owl had the power to possess the souls of those it encountered. It could slip into their bodies unnoticed, taking control of their actions and thoughts. Its victims would be left in a state of paralysis, trapped inside their own bodies, unable to resist the owl's control. This ability to seize control of the mind was perhaps one of the most terrifying aspects of the owl's mythos. It was not merely a physical threat, it was a psychological one, a creature that could invade the deepest recesses of the mind and turn even the most stalwart individual into a puppet of its will. But what made the owl truly fascinating was the duality of its nature. While it was undeniably a creature of terror, it was not always portrayed as purely evil. In some stories, the owl was said to be a guardian figure, protecting the sacred realms and punishing those who sought to disturb the natural order. In these tales, the owl was not an enemy to be vanquished, but a force to be respected, a reminder of the precarious balance between good and evil. It was a guardian of the threshold, standing between the known world and the mysteries beyond, its presence a sign that the boundary between life and death was not as clear-cut as it seemed. In other versions of the story, the owl was a fallen angel or spirit, cursed to roam the earth, driven by a desire for revenge or redemption. This tragic aspect of the owl added a layer of complexity to its character. It was not merely a creature of destruction, but one that carried within it a deep sorrow, a reminder that the line between good and evil is not always as stark as it seems. It was a being trapped in its own fate, forever torn between its desire to do good and the darker impulses that drove it to do harm. The owl's role in folklore often revolved around its interaction with humans, particularly its relationships with those who found themselves caught in the owl's web. Some legends told of travelers who, while passing through desolate areas, would encounter the owl in the form of a beautiful woman or an old beggar. They would offer help, only to find themselves trapped in the creature's clutches. It was said that the owl would then use its powers to drain the life force from its victims, feeding on their energy until they were nothing more than hollow shells of their former selves. But in some versions of the tale, the owl's powers were not purely destructive. In these stories, it was said that the owl could bestow gifts upon those it favored, offering them wisdom or knowledge in exchange for a price. These exchanges were often portrayed as a dangerous gamble. To accept the owl's gift could lead to great fortune or terrible misfortune, depending on how one approached the offer. The owl, like the trickster gods of other cultures, was unpredictable and capricious, and its gifts were not always as they seemed. What makes the owl so compelling is the tension between these two extremes, its malevolence and its potential for redemption, its role as both a punisher and a protector. In some stories, the owl was seen as a cautionary figure, warning against the dangers of meddling with forces beyond human understanding. It was a reminder that the world was filled with powers that were not meant to be tampered with, that there were forces at play in the universe that could never be fully understood. In other tales, it was a symbol of the fragile line between good and evil, a reminder that even the most terrifying of creatures could hold within them the seeds of something more complex, something more human. In the modern world, the owl has lost much of its fearsome edge, becoming a figure of myth and legend rather than a tangible threat. Yet, the stories of the owl still resonate in the hearts and minds of those who hear them. They serve as a reminder of the darkness that lies within the human heart, the part of ourselves that we often try to ignore or forget. The owl, in all its forms, be it a terrifying creature of the night or a guardian of the boundaries between worlds, remains a symbol of the struggle between light and darkness, of the forces within us all that threaten to take control if we are not careful. The legacy of the owl in Persian folklore endures, not just as a cautionary tale, but as a reflection of the deeper fears and desires that shape the human experience. Its shadow still lingers in the corners of our imagination, reminding us of the darkness that is never far away, and the delicate balance between order and chaos that exists in every corner of the world. In the ancient lands of Persia, where the winds whispered secrets of the past and the mountains stood silent witness to the ebb and flow of time, the owl lurked in the shadows. A creature both feared and revered, it was believed to be capable of slipping through the cracks of the world, unseen and unnoticed, only to strike with terrifying force when its presence was least expected. As the stories of the owl grew darker and more unsettling, the people, bound to the traditions of their ancestors, sought ways to protect themselves from its malevolent touch. The need for protective rituals became a crucial part of everyday life, a means of warding off the darkness that threatened to invade the quiet corners of their existence. The rituals to protect against the owl were as varied as the regions from which they emerged, each one infused with the unique customs and beliefs of the people who performed them. But at the heart of each of these practices lay a shared understanding: the owl was not a creature to be confronted with brute force alone. Its power was subtle, its influence insidious, and any attempt to face it head-on without the proper preparations would almost certainly lead to disaster. No, the people of Persia knew that to defend against the owl, they would need to call upon forces greater than their own, to invoke the spirits of protection and call upon ancient wisdom to create barriers that could keep the owl at bay. One of the most common rituals involved the use of sacred herbs and incense. The scent of burning herbs, it was believed, had the power to purify the air and ward off malevolent spirits. In the small villages nestled between the mountains, it was common for families to light bundles of dried sage, frankincense, or myrrh at dusk as the shadows began to lengthen. The smoke would swirl around the home, filling every corner with the scent of holiness and protection. The people believed that this ritual created a spiritual shield around their homes, an invisible barrier that no dark force, least of all the owl, could cross. The smoke acted as a purifier, clearing away negative energy and creating a safe space where the creature's influence could not reach. In addition to the use of incense, the practice of carving protective symbols into doorways and thresholds was another common method of safeguarding one's home from the owl. The ancient Persians believed that certain shapes and symbols held the power to repel evil and banish harmful spirits. These symbols were often drawn with sacred oils or etched into the wood itself, with careful precision and reverence. The most popular of these symbols was the Faravahar, a representation of the divine protector, Ahura Mazda. By inscribing this symbol over the doorways, the people invoked the protection of the divine, creating a barrier that no creature, no matter how powerful, could breach. But protection from the owl was not limited to rituals involving physical symbols. The people of Persia also turned to the power of words, recognizing the ancient magic held within the spoken language. The recitation of certain prayers, chants, or invocations was said to call upon spiritual forces capable of warding off evil. These words, passed down through generations, held the key to summoning the protection of the gods. One of the most commonly used prayers was the Ahanavarya, a Zoroastrian hymn believed to hold immense power against evil spirits. As the words echoed through the air, the people believed that the divine presence would be summoned, creating an invisible shield around them and their homes. In some regions, the practice of wearing protective amulets became widespread. These amulets, often crafted from precious metals or stones, were imbued with powerful blessings. They were worn as necklaces, tucked beneath clothing, or kept close to the body in order to keep the owl and other malevolent forces at bay. The amulets often featured symbols of protection, such as the Simurgh, a bird of wisdom and healing, or the Ahriman, a symbol of the eternal struggle between light and darkness. These symbols were believed to possess a protective aura that could guard the wearer against the owl's grasp, ensuring that they would remain safe from its reach. For those who lived in remote areas, far from the safety of community and tradition, the owl was an ever-present threat. To safeguard themselves during their travels, many would carry with them small, portable talismans or protective charms, often blessed by a local spiritual leader. These talismans were thought to have the power to shield the traveler from harm, whether it be from the owl or other dangers lurking in the wilderness. A traveler might tie a piece of red thread around their wrist or keep a small pouch of blessed herbs in their pocket, knowing that these simple objects would serve as a lifeline against the creature's wrath. At times, the rituals to protect against the owl were not just solitary acts, but communal events, bringing together families and neighbors in shared reverence. In the deep of winter, when the nights were longest and the owl's presence was most strongly felt, the villagers would gather in a central place to perform a collective ritual of protection. They would sing songs of praise to the divine, invoking the strength of Ahura Mazda and the power of the Simurgh to guard against the forces of darkness. These rituals were accompanied by the rhythmic beat of drums and the lighting of ceremonial fires, which were believed to burn away the malevolent influence of the owl. There were also times when the people of Persia turned to the wisdom of their elders, seeking advice and guidance on how best to protect themselves. The elders, those who had lived through countless seasons and witnessed the changing of many moons, were thought to possess an intimate knowledge of the spiritual world. They knew how to read the signs of the universe and could offer advice on how to perform protective rituals in the most effective way. It was said that these wise individuals could sense when the owl was near, and they would provide specific instructions on what steps to take to safeguard against its influence. Throughout all these rituals, there was an underlying belief in the power of light, both physical and spiritual. Whether it was the light of the sacred fire or the symbolic light of hope and faith, it was believed that light had the ability to push back the darkness. The owl thrived in the shadows, and as long as the light shone, the creature could not endure. This belief gave the people of Persia a sense of control over their fate, a belief that no matter how great the darkness might seem, it could always be pushed back by the light of divine power, wisdom, and protection. The rituals against the owl were not just acts of superstition, but expressions of a deep-seated belief in the balance between good and evil, light and dark. They were a way for the people to maintain control over their lives and ensure that the forces of chaos would never overwhelm them. Even as time passed and the world changed, these rituals remained a vital part of Persian folklore, a testament to the enduring belief in the unseen forces that shaped the world. The rituals were not just about protecting against a mythical creature, they were about affirming the power of light, the strength of community, and the unshakable belief in the forces that protect us, even when we cannot see them. In the depth of the night, when the stars above seemed to burn with ancient secrets and the winds whispered tales from long ago, the owl lurked in the dark corners of Persian culture, a figure that carried with it both terror and fascination. Its shadow stretched across the boundaries of myth, folklore, and art, carving out a space in the collective consciousness of the Persian people. But what was it that made the owl such a powerful and enduring symbol? What did it represent, not just as a creature of fear, but as a force woven into the very fabric of Persian identity? The owl was not merely a creature to be feared, it was a manifestation of deeper themes and ideas, an embodiment of the darker forces that shaped the world. It represented the unknown, the forces that lay just beyond human understanding, the mysteries that could never be fully explained or controlled. In a world where the line between the seen and the unseen was often blurred, the owl stood as a reminder that not everything could be conquered by the light. There was always darkness lurking at the edges, waiting to encroach upon the peaceful, everyday existence of the people. At its core, the owl was a symbol of chaos and disorder. Its very existence threatened the natural order of the world, and in that sense, it embodied the forces that could upend stability and bring about destruction. In many ways, the owl represented the unpredictable elements of life, the sudden storms, the unforeseen tragedies, and the invisible forces that could disrupt even the most peaceful moments. The creature was the personification of these chaotic forces, a reminder that no matter how much humans tried to impose order upon the world, there were always elements beyond their control. But the owl was more than just a symbol of destruction, it was also a representation of the fragility of the human spirit. It was said that the owl had the power to possess the minds and souls of those it encountered, twisting them into dark versions of themselves. This ability to take control of the mind reflected the vulnerability of the human psyche, the ease with which one could fall prey to negative influences, fear, and temptation. The owl was a reminder that the human spirit was not invincible, and that the struggle between light and darkness was not just an external battle, but one that raged within each person. It was a symbol of the internal struggles we all face, the battle to maintain our integrity, our sanity, and our sense of self in the face of overwhelming darkness. In Persian culture, the owl also carried with it a sense of moral ambiguity. While it was undeniably a figure of fear and destruction, it was not entirely evil. Some interpretations of the owl cast it as a tragic figure, a being caught in an eternal struggle, torn between the forces of light and dark, its actions shaped by its own inner torment. In these versions of the myth, the owl was not simply a demon to be vanquished, but a creature to be understood. It symbolized the complexity of existence, the idea that good and evil were not always clearly defined, and that every being, no matter how terrifying, had a story behind it. The owl was a reflection of the Persian understanding that the world was not black and white, but filled with shades of gray. Even the darkest creatures had their own reasons, their own motivations, and their own struggles. This moral complexity of the owl was also reflected in its role as a trickster. In many stories, the owl was portrayed as a deceiver, using its cunning and shape-shifting abilities to manipulate and confuse its victims. It could appear as a beautiful woman, a helpless old man, or a harmless creature, only to reveal its true nature when it was too late. This ability to disguise itself mirrored the deceptive nature of evil in the real world. Evil did not always appear as a monster, it often took on the guise of something beautiful or innocent, something that could lure people in before revealing its true destructive nature. The owl, as a trickster, reminded the people of Persia to be cautious, to question appearances, and to remain vigilant in the face of deception. The symbolism of the owl extended beyond its role as a fearsome creature. It was also a representation of the boundary between the living and the dead, the known and the unknown. In Persian belief, death was not an end but a transition, a crossing over from one realm to another. The owl existed in the space between these worlds, a creature that could cross the threshold between life and death with ease. It was said to be drawn to places where the veil between the living and the dead was thin, graveyards, desolate ruins, and forgotten temples, where it could feed off the residual energy of the departed. In this sense, the owl was a reminder of the transient nature of life, and the inescapable truth that death, and the darkness that came with it, was always just around the corner. Yet, despite its association with darkness and death, the owl was also a symbol of protection in some interpretations of the myth. In certain stories, the owl was said to be a guardian of sacred knowledge or a protector of the borders between the physical world and the spiritual one. This duality added another layer to the owl's symbolism. It was a figure that could be both a destroyer and a protector, a figure that could bring death and life in equal measure. It reminded the people of Persia that the forces of the universe were not always what they seemed, that the balance of life and death, creation and destruction, was fragile and ever-shifting. This complex symbolism made the owl a deeply significant figure in Persian culture. It was not just a creature of myth, it was a mirror of the human experience, reflecting the struggles between light and dark, life and death, good and evil. The owl embodied the fear of the unknown, the terror of losing control, and the uncertainty of existence. It was a reminder that the world was not a place of simple answers, but a place of complexity, ambiguity, and constant change. Over time, the owl faded from the forefront of Persian culture, its presence slipping into the shadows of myth and legend. Yet, its symbolism endured, woven into the fabric of Persian art, literature, and philosophy. The themes it represented, the struggle between light and dark, the fear of the unknown, and the fragile nature of the human soul, continued to resonate with the people of Persia. The owl remained a powerful symbol, a reminder of the forces that shape the world and the inner battles that each person must face. Even as the centuries passed and the world changed, the owl's shadow continued to loom large, its symbolism as potent and relevant as ever. The owl slithered its way into the fabric of Persian artistic expression, its image haunting canvases, carvings, and tapestries across centuries. Artists, seized by the creature's ominous aura, sought to capture its dark essence, creating depictions that mirrored humanity's fears and fascinations. Through their work, the owl emerged not only as a figure of terror but as a profound symbol, its form shifting with the tides of cultural perception. From ancient grotesques to modern reinterpretations, the artistic evolution of the owl reflected the changing relationship between the Persian people and their myths. In the earliest renderings, the owl was a grotesque entity, its features exaggerated to provoke visceral fear. These depictions were not crafted to intrigue or entice, but to warn. Found etched onto the surfaces of ancient ceramic bowls and wall reliefs, the owl appeared as a twisted amalgamation of the familiar and the monstrous, its skeletal frame adorned with sagging flesh, its talons curling menacingly. Artists emphasized its predatory essence, portraying elongated, clawed fingers reaching out as if to snatch its unsuspecting victims. The eyes, often depicted as hollow or glowing, seemed to pierce the viewer's soul, embodying the creature's unrelenting hunger. These artistic creations often served ritualistic purposes. In rural communities, vessels adorned with the owl's visage were used in protective ceremonies. The belief was that by confronting the creature's image, one could disarm its power. Such depictions were not merely artistic expressions, but tools of spiritual defense, born from a need to acknowledge and neutralize the creature's influence. As Persian art advanced into the medieval period, the owl began to take on a more narrative role, appearing in illustrated manuscripts that brought its stories to life. One of the most vivid examples can be found in miniatures accompanying Persian folktales, where the owl was depicted lurking in shadowy corners, preying upon vulnerable figures such as expectant mothers or travelers lost in desolate landscapes. These images, often painted with vibrant mineral pigments, contrasted the owl's dark presence with the vivid world around it, heightening its menacing aura. The owl became a visual metaphor for the ever-present threats that lurk beneath life's surface beauty, waiting to strike when least expected. The manuscript tradition also allowed artists to experiment with the owl's form. While the creature retained its grotesque features, it was sometimes given an almost human-like quality, its expressions twisted with malice or pain. This anthropomorphism blurred the lines between monster and human, reflecting the Persian philosophical idea that evil was not an external force, but one rooted within the human condition. In these illustrations, the owl was no longer just an external threat, but a mirror to humanity's darkest impulses. Moving into the Safavid era, Persian art embraced a new level of refinement, and so too did depictions of the owl. While its terrifying essence remained, artists began incorporating it into larger compositions that balanced beauty and horror. One striking example can be found in the ornamental tilework of some shrines and palaces, where demonic figures resembling the owl are woven into intricate floral and geometric designs. These subtle incorporations spoke to the duality of existence, beauty and terror coexisting within the same frame. The owl, once a figure of pure dread, became a symbol of life's inherent contradictions. In later centuries, as Persian culture intersected with global artistic movements, the owl underwent another transformation. Influenced by Romanticism, artists began portraying the owl as a tragic figure, imbued with sorrow and complexity. Paintings from this era show the creature not as a predator but as a solitary, mournful being, wandering desolate landscapes under moonlit skies. The emphasis shifted from its monstrosity to its isolation, suggesting that the owl was as much a victim of its nature as its prey were. These depictions invited the viewer to empathize with the creature, to see it not as a monster but as a representation of humanity's loneliness and inner turmoil. The 20th century brought even bolder reinterpretations of the owl as modern art movements took hold in Persia. Abstract painters and sculptors used the owl as a symbol of societal anxieties and the lingering shadows of the past. In some pieces, the owl appeared fragmented, its features distorted and scattered across the canvas, reflecting the fragmented nature of human fears. In others, it was rendered almost unrecognizable, a swirling mass of darkness that seemed to pulse with energy. These abstract interpretations stripped the creature of its physical form, instead focusing on the emotions it evoked: fear, dread, and the inescapable weight of the unknown. In literature and theater, too, the owl found new life. Playwrights incorporated the creature into allegorical narratives, using its image to critique tyranny and societal corruption. The owl became a stand-in for oppressive forces, a shadow cast over the lives of ordinary people. The creature's symbolic power, long rooted in its mythological origins, was reimagined to resonate with contemporary struggles. In modern times, the owl continues to inspire artists, particularly those exploring themes of identity and cultural heritage. Persian diaspora artists often revisit the owl as a way to connect with their roots while addressing universal fears and uncertainties. Digital artists, embracing new technologies, have brought the owl into virtual spaces, crafting immersive experiences that allow viewers to confront the creature in hauntingly lifelike forms. These depictions emphasize the owl's timeless relevance, proving that its shadow still lingers in the collective imagination. Through the centuries, the owl has remained a figure of fear, fascination, and reflection. From the stark, terrifying images of ancient times to the nuanced, empathetic portrayals of today, its evolution in Persian art mirrors the shifting dynamics of culture, philosophy, and identity. Yet, for all its transformations, the owl retains its core essence, a reminder of the unseen forces that shape our world, the chaos that lingers at the edges of order, and the power of myth to illuminate the darkest corners of the human experience. The Griffin, with its lion's body and eagle's head, straddled two worlds, the earth and the sky, the mundane and the divine. Its mythological roots, anchored in Persian and Mesopotamian lore, stretch back into the earliest whispers of civilization, where gods, monsters, and heroes shared the same breath. It was a creature born from the rich tapestry of two ancient cultures, blending their reverence for power, majesty, and mystery into a single form. The Griffin was more than a hybrid beast. It was a symbol of balance, a guardian of treasures both earthly and spiritual, and an enduring testament to the imagination of humanity. The Griffin's origins are tangled with those of Mesopotamian mythology, where creatures like the lamassu, a winged bull with a human head, guarded temples and palaces, and the Anzu bird, a lion-headed eagle, soared through the skies. These beings, embodying both protection and divine wrath, laid the conceptual groundwork for the Griffin. They symbolized strength, vigilance, and a connection to the heavens, qualities that would later define the Griffin in Persian mythology. Yet, unlike the lamassu and Anzu, the Griffin was not confined to the divine sphere. It traversed the mortal realm as a guardian of treasures, weaving its mythos through both human and celestial concerns. In Persian culture, the Griffin found its place within the grand narratives of the ancient Achaemenid Empire. Depictions of griffins began appearing on bas-reliefs, ceramics, and textiles, often portrayed in fierce, dynamic poses. With their eagle-like heads and lion bodies, these creatures embodied the dual forces of intellect and strength. The eagle's piercing vision and dominion over the skies complemented the lion's power and sovereignty over the earth. Together, these traits made the Griffin a symbol of perfect balance, an ideal fusion of physical and spiritual mastery. It was not merely a creature of raw power. In Persian mythology, the Griffin carried deeper symbolic meanings tied to protection and wisdom. Its image often adorned royal insignias and the gates of palaces, where it served as a guardian of both material and spiritual treasures. To pass beneath the watchful eyes of the Griffin was to be reminded of the eternal vigilance required to safeguard what one holds dear. It stood as a silent sentinel, warding off chaos and guarding against the intrusion of the profane into the sacred. The Griffin also bridged the human and divine realms through its connection to Zoroastrian philosophy. In Zoroastrian thought, the universe was a battleground of dualities, good and evil, light and darkness, order and chaos. The griffin's very form reflected this duality, its avian half reaching for the heavens, its leonine body rooted in the earth. This dual nature made it a potent symbol of the harmony sought by Zoroastrian teachings, where balance was key to the cosmic order. The griffin, soaring between the realms, was both a mediator and a protector, embodying the struggle to maintain equilibrium in an ever-shifting world. While Mesopotamian influences shaped the griffin's early iconography, Persian artisans and storytellers imbued it with a unique identity that resonated deeply within their culture. In Persian tales, the griffin often appeared as a guardian of mythical treasures, golden hoards, sacred texts, or enchanted objects that held the keys to immense power. These treasures were not merely material, they were imbued with spiritual significance, representing the rewards of wisdom, virtue, and perseverance. To seek out the griffin's treasure was not just to embark on a quest for riches, but to confront one's own fears, doubts, and limitations. It was a test of character, a journey of transformation. The griffin's role as a protector extended to its connection with kingship. In both Persian and Mesopotamian art, it was often depicted alongside symbols of royalty and divine authority. Its presence signified the ruler's strength and legitimacy, as well as their duty to maintain harmony within their domain. For the kings of Persia, aligning themselves with the griffin was a way of invoking its qualities, courage, vigilance, and a balance between earthly power and spiritual wisdom. The griffin became a metaphor for the ideal ruler, one who wielded authority with both might and grace. As Persian culture spread through trade and conquest, so too did the image of the griffin. Its depictions began appearing far beyond the borders of the empire, influencing the art and mythology of neighboring civilizations. In Greek mythology, the griffin took on a more fearsome role, guarding gold in the distant mountains of Scythia and attacking those who dared to steal it. Yet, even in these foreign tales, the griffin retained its core attributes of power and guardianship, a testament to the enduring strength of its Persian roots. The griffin's journey through history is one of transformation and adaptation, yet its essence remains constant. It is a creature that embodies duality, balance, and protection, a symbol that resonates across cultures and eras. In Persian mythology, it stands as a bridge between the terrestrial and the celestial, a reminder that strength and wisdom are inseparable, and that true guardianship requires both power and purpose. As the sands of time continued to shift, the griffin became more than a figure of myth, it became an enduring emblem of cultural identity. Its presence in art, literature, and folklore kept alive the ancient ideals of harmony and vigilance, reminding generations of the values that lay at the heart of Persian civilization. And though its wings may no longer shadow the skies, the griffin's legacy endures, its spirit soaring through the stories and symbols that continue to inspire awe and reverence. The griffin stood watch over the most sacred and untouchable places, its talons gripping the edges of time and legend. In the ancient lore of Persia, it was not merely a creature of myth, but a sentinel of the extraordinary. When tales of treasure, both material and spiritual, were whispered across firelit gatherings, the griffin was often at their heart, a guardian whose presence demanded awe and fear in equal measure. To encounter the griffin was to face not only the beast, but the profound truths it protected, truths buried deep within the folds of human longing and the mysteries of the universe. In one of the oldest stories passed down through Persian oral tradition, a griffin is said to have guarded a mountain of gold hidden deep within the Zagros range. This treasure, they said, was not meant for mortal hands, but for the gods themselves, a celestial bounty that shimmered like captured sunlight. According to legend, a band of reckless warriors sought to claim this treasure for themselves. Driven by greed and hubris, they ascended the treacherous cliffs, their hearts blind to the warnings etched in the stones below. Each step closer brought a sense of foreboding until, at the peak, they were met with the griffin, a massive, radiant figure silhouetted against the storm-darkened sky. The encounter was not a battle but a reckoning. The griffin's eagle eyes saw through the warriors' bravado, piercing into the depths of their souls. Some say it spoke, its voice resonating like the toll of a distant bell, asking a single question: "What will you sacrifice for what you seek?" The warriors, unable to answer, were swept away by the wind stirred from the griffin's wings, their ambition scattered like leaves before a tempest. The treasure remained untouched, the mountain silent once more. But the tale endured, a lesson in the cost of greed and the sacredness of what lies beyond human reach. In another tale, the Griffin appears not as a hoarder of wealth, but as a guardian of life itself. This story speaks of a hidden spring, said to flow with water that could heal any wound and cure any illness. The spring was sacred, a gift from the divine, and the Griffin was its protector. A wandering healer, desperate to save her dying child, sought the spring after hearing whispers of its existence. Unlike the warriors who sought gold, the healer came not with arrogance but with humility, her tears a testament to her desperation. When she reached the spring, the Griffin appeared, its wings casting a golden shadow over the water. It did not attack but stood as an unyielding barrier between her and the life-giving stream. Understanding the unspoken challenge, the healer knelt and offered her only possession of value, a locket containing a lock of her child's hair. She spoke not of her need but of her gratitude, vowing to guard the spring's secret with her life. Moved by her sincerity, the Griffin allowed her to take a single sip of the water, enough to save her child. She returned home, her child restored to health, and the Griffin returned to its silent vigil, a reminder that even the most sacred gifts require respect and sacrifice. Beyond guarding treasures and sacred places, the Griffin also served as a figure of judgment in Persian lore. In one famous story, it is said to have appeared during the reign of a corrupt king who hoarded wealth and allowed his people to suffer. The Griffin descended upon the king's palace, its massive form shattering the gates. The king, trembling in fear, tried to bribe the creature with gold and jewels, but the Griffin remained unmoved. Instead, it seized the treasure and scattered it across the kingdom, its powerful wings carrying the riches to those who needed them most. The king, left with nothing, was forced to confront his own greed, his tyranny laid bare for all to see. The Griffin vanished, leaving behind a kingdom forever changed by its judgment. These stories, while varied in their details, share a common thread: the Griffin as a protector not of mere objects but of values, integrity, humility, and reverence for the sacred. Its presence in Persian lore was a reminder that treasures, whether of gold, water, or wisdom, were not to be taken lightly. They were gifts of the divine, meant to be guarded and respected rather than claimed and consumed. Art and literature further immortalized these tales, with the Griffin often portrayed as a luminous figure whose very presence commanded respect. In illuminated manuscripts, it was depicted with wings outstretched, its claws gripping the ground as if tethering the celestial to the earthly. Poets wove its image into their verses, likening its vigilance to the watchful eyes of justice and its strength to the unyielding power of truth. The Griffin was not just a creature of legend, but a symbol of the values that lay at the heart of Persian culture, a guardian of balance, harmony, and the sacred bond between humanity and the divine. As these stories traveled across generations, the Griffin's role as a protector expanded, its image becoming a symbol of hope and perseverance. Parents told these tales to their children not only as cautionary fables but as a source of inspiration, a reminder that courage and integrity could overcome even the most formidable challenges. The Griffin stood as a beacon in the dark, a creature of unmatched strength and wisdom that reminded all who heard its tales of the treasures worth protecting, not of gold or jewels, but of spirit and virtue. And yet, even as its legends inspired awe, the Griffin's watchful eyes seemed to hint at something more, a connection to forces beyond comprehension, guarding secrets that whispered of what was yet to come. The Griffin was not just a creature of awe, it was a declaration etched into the fabric of myth, a symbol of strength and nobility that stood unwavering through the rise and fall of empires. Its image, blending the might of a lion with the majesty of an eagle, conveyed a duality that resonated deeply with the human spirit. In the annals of Persian culture, the Griffin was more than a fantastical beast. It was an embodiment of ideals, a beacon of power tempered by wisdom, a symbol of kingship, protection, and moral integrity. Strength was woven into the Griffin's very essence. The lion, king of the land, brought unparalleled physical power and courage to its form. It represented dominance, the ability to command respect and overcome adversaries. To the ancients, the lion was more than an animal, it was a force of nature, a symbol of unyielding authority. The Griffin, inheriting this legacy, carried the lion's terrestrial dominance to new heights, fusing it with the eagle's soaring grace and vision. The eagle, ruler of the skies, added a divine quality, its piercing gaze symbolizing clarity, insight, and an unrelenting pursuit of truth. In Persian culture, this combination of lion and eagle became a metaphor for a perfect ruler, one who possessed the strength to protect and the wisdom to lead with fairness and foresight. The griffin's powerful frame and vigilant eyes were depicted on royal banners and palace gates, serving as reminders of the qualities required to govern justly. To those who ruled, the griffin was not merely an emblem, it was a standard to strive toward, a reflection of their duty to maintain balance and harmony within their realms. The nobility of the griffin lay not only in its might, but also in its unwavering commitment to safeguarding what was precious. Legend spoke of its role as a protector of treasures, both tangible and intangible. Gold, jewels, and sacred relics were often depicted under its watchful gaze, but the griffin's guardianship extended far beyond material wealth. It protected the treasures of the spirit, justice, honor, and virtue, qualities that define true nobility. To embody the griffin's essence was to wield power responsibly, to guard against corruption and tyranny, and to uphold the sacred bonds between ruler and subject, human and divine. The griffin's symbolic resonance extended to its role as a mediator between realms. With its lion's body rooted in the earth and its eagle's wings touching the heavens, it became a bridge between the mortal and the celestial. This dual nature imbued the griffin with a sense of divine purpose, its presence signifying a connection to higher truths. In Zoroastrian teachings, where dualities shaped the understanding of the universe, the griffin stood as a representation of harmony, a balance between strength and grace, power and wisdom, earth and sky. The griffin's strength and nobility also found expression in the art and literature of ancient Persia. On bas-reliefs and ceramics, it was often depicted in dynamic poses, its claws gripping the earth as its wings reached skyward. These images captured the tension between opposing forces, earthly might and heavenly aspiration, while conveying the unity of the griffin's form. In poetry, its image inspired verses of grandeur and reverence, likening its majesty to the divine qualities of kingship and justice. To Persian poets, the griffin was not just a creature of legend, it was a muse, a symbol of ideals that transcended the mortal realm. Over time, the griffin's symbolism evolved, reflecting the changing aspirations of those who invoked its image. As Persian culture spread through trade and conquest, the griffin became a universal emblem of power and protection, appearing in the art and mythology of neighboring civilizations. Yet, even as it adapted to new contexts, its core meaning remained intact. The griffin was always a creature of balance, its strength tempered by wisdom, its nobility grounded in responsibility. For the people of ancient Persia, the griffin was more than a symbol, it was a source of inspiration, a reminder of the qualities that defined greatness. To see its image was to be reminded of the ideals it represented, courage, vigilance, and a commitment to justice. And for those who ruled, it was a call to embody these virtues, to wield power not for personal gain but for the greater good. Even today, the griffin's legacy endures. Its image, passed down through centuries of art and storytelling, continues to evoke a sense of awe and reverence. It remains a testament to the enduring power of myth, a reminder that strength and nobility are not mere attributes but ideals to be strived for. A balance of force and integrity that shapes the very foundations of human civilization. Yet, as the griffin story continues to inspire, its gaze seems to stretch beyond the present, as if searching for the next chapter in its timeless tale. The griffin did not merely reside in the imaginations of storytellers, it became a living presence etched into the walls, columns, and artifacts of Persian culture. Persian architecture and art, celebrated for their intricate detail and profound symbolism, embraced the griffin as a motif that spoke of strength, protection, and divine connection. Whether carved into stone or painted on delicate ceramics, the griffin's image carried a message that resonated through time, the guardianship of the sacred and the enduring harmony between might and grace. One of the most iconic appearances of the griffin in Persian architecture is found in the ruins of Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Empire. Here, the griffin takes its place among other mythical creatures, its powerful form carved into the grand staircases and gateways. With its lion's body and eagle's wings, it exudes an aura of vigilance and authority, a protector of the empire's heart. These carvings were not mere decoration, they were deliberate symbols, reminders to all who entered that this was a place guarded by forces beyond the mortal realm. The griffin stood as a sentinel, a silent witness to the aspirations and ambitions of the rulers who once walked these halls. Persian artisans often incorporated the griffin into smaller, portable works of art. On ceramic tiles, its image came to life in vivid hues of blue, gold, and white, the colors reflecting its divine and regal associations. These tiles adorned the walls of palaces and mosques, creating a visual tapestry that linked earthly spaces to celestial ideals. In metalwork, griffins were engraved on bowls, platters, and ceremonial weapons, their forms capturing both the fluidity of life and the unyielding strength of their symbolism. These objects were not just functional, they were statements of cultural identity, tangible expressions of the values the griffin embodied. In manuscripts, the griffin often appeared alongside heroic tales and spiritual reflections. Persian miniaturists, renowned for their meticulous attention to detail, painted griffins with delicate strokes that brought out the texture of feathers and fur, the sharpness of talons, and the intensity of their gaze. These illustrations complemented the narratives they accompanied, serving as visual metaphors for the themes of the stories: courage, vigilance, and the eternal struggle between good and evil. The griffin also found its way into Persian textiles, where it adorned carpets, tapestries, and clothing. Woven into intricate patterns, it became part of the everyday lives of those who used these items. In royal courts, carpets featuring the griffin symbolized the strength and wisdom of the ruler, while in common households, they were believed to bring protection and prosperity. The tactile presence of the griffin in these fabrics made it a symbol that could be both revered and touched, bridging the gap between myth and reality. Persian art also used the griffin as a tool for storytelling, embedding it into allegorical scenes that carried layers of meaning. In one such depiction, a griffin stands guard over a tree laden with golden fruit, its posture both protective and commanding. This image, rich with symbolism, represents not just physical treasures but the fruits of knowledge, spirituality, and moral integrity. The griffin's role as a guardian extends beyond material wealth, reminding viewers of the sacredness of these intangible gifts. What made the griffin's depiction in Persian art unique was its ability to convey both power and elegance. The artists who created these images were not merely capturing a mythical creature, they were distilling an ideal. The griffin's muscular frame spoke of unyielding strength, while its outstretched wings suggested transcendence and freedom. Its sharp beak and piercing eyes hinted at its role as a judge and protector, while its calm, poised demeanor conveyed a sense of nobility and restraint. Over time, the griffin's image evolved, blending with the artistic traditions of other cultures as Persian influence spread through trade and conquest. Yet, even as it took on new forms and meanings, its essence remained intact. The griffin continued to symbolize the balance of power and grace, a legacy rooted in its Persian origins. Today, the echoes of these ancient depictions can still be seen in Persian-inspired designs around the world. From architectural motifs to modern art, the griffin remains a symbol of protection, strength, and the enduring connection between humanity and the divine. Its presence in Persian architecture and art is not merely a relic of the past, but a reminder of the timeless values it represents, a bridge between the ancient and the eternal, guarding treasures that transcend the material world. And yet, as the griffin's wings stretch across the ages, its gaze lingers on the horizon, where other myths wait to be told and their guardians to be remembered. Kamak was not merely a creature of myth, but a being that thrived in the shadowy spaces of fear and fascination. Known as the colossal horned dragon of Persian mythology, Kamak emerged in the rich tapestry of stories as a figure that embodied destruction, greed, and an insatiable hunger for dominance. Its very name sent shivers through the hearts of those who dared whisper it, a reminder of the chaos that always threatened to rise when humanity's darker impulses were left unchecked. Legends describe Kamak as a beast so vast and terrible that its scales glistened like molten metal, each one harder than iron and sharper than any blade. Its eyes, glowing with an unnatural light, seemed to pierce through the souls of those who encountered it. Horns spiraled out from its monstrous head, twisted like the roots of a cursed tree, and its breath was said to ignite the air, reducing the bravest of warriors to ash. It was not just a dragon, it was a force of nature, unrelenting in its pursuit of devastation. The origin of Kamak is steeped in ancient myth, its roots tracing back to the chaos of creation. In one tale, Kamak was born from the remnants of Ahriman's malice, the malevolent force in Zoroastrianism that sought to corrupt and destroy the order of Ahura Mazda. Where Ahura Mazda brought light and life, Ahriman bred darkness and decay, and from this darkness, Kamak emerged, a creature born not of flesh but of rage and envy. Kamak's earliest story begins in the distant mountains where the dragon slumbered for centuries, undisturbed and unseen. Its awakening was a harbinger of calamity, triggered by the greed of a corrupt king. Desperate to expand his dominion, the king ordered his men to excavate the sacred mountain, believing it concealed treasures beyond imagination. They dug deep, disturbing the dragon's ancient rest. Kamak rose from the depths in a fury, its roar shaking the earth and darkening the skies. It descended upon the king's lands, burning villages and devouring all in its path, an unstoppable tide of destruction. In another tale, Kamak was said to guard the Fountain of Eternity, a mythical spring whose waters granted immortality. Many sought the fountain, but none who faced Kamak returned to tell the tale. The dragon was not just a guardian but a test, a manifestation of the hubris that drives mortals to seek what they should not possess. Only those pure of heart, untainted by greed, could pass Kamak's fiery judgment. Yet no hero in these stories ever succeeded, leaving the fountain and the dragon shrouded in mystery. Perhaps the most famous myth involving Kamak is its confrontation with Garshasp, a legendary Persian hero. Garshasp, renowned for his strength and valor, was tasked with defeating Kamak after the dragon's rampage left a trail of devastation. This tale paints a vivid picture of their clash, a battle that raged across mountains and valleys, the very earth trembling beneath their fury. Kamak's scales proved impervious to Garshasp's sword, and its fiery breath seemed unstoppable. But Garshasp, clever and unyielding, discovered the dragon's weakness, a single vulnerable spot beneath its massive jaw. With precision and courage, he struck, piercing the beast's heart and ending its reign of terror. Yet even in death, Kamak's legend did not fade. Its body, it is said, became part of the landscape, its bones forming the spines of distant mountains and its blood seeping into the rivers, tainting them with an otherworldly hue. Some believe that its spirit lingered, bound to the land it once ravaged, its presence a reminder of the chaos that lies dormant within the world, and within us all. Kamak's myths were more than stories of a fearsome dragon, they were allegories, reflections of humanity's struggle against its own darker nature. The dragon's greed mirrored the destructive impulses of those who sought power at any cost, while its fiery wrath represented the consequences of arrogance and disregard for the natural order. Kamak became a symbol of what happens when the balance of the world is disrupted, a cautionary tale woven into the cultural consciousness. Even today, the story of Kamak endures, its imagery finding its way into modern interpretations of Persian mythology. Artists depict the dragon in vivid detail, its fearsome visage both terrifying and captivating. Writers and poets continue to draw from its tales, exploring the themes of hubris, courage, and the eternal battle between order and chaos. Kamak remains a potent symbol, a reminder of the power of myth to illuminate the struggles within the human heart. And yet, as the echoes of Kamak's roar fade into the mists of legend, the landscape of Persian mythology shifts once more. For every shadow cast by a beast of destruction, there is a glimmer of light, a creature of hope, waiting to rise. Kamak was no ordinary beast, it was the raw embodiment of nature's fury, an untamed force that transcended human understanding. It was not born out of malice alone, but from the earth's own violent heartbeat, a manifestation of the chaos and destruction that could arise when humanity failed to respect the delicate balance of the world. In the myths and stories that have survived the passage of centuries, Kamak stands as a stark reminder of nature's ability to create, to nurture, and to destroy with equal measure. The legends describe Kamak as a monstrous, horned dragon whose every movement mirrored the earthquakes that shook the mountains, whose breath scorched the skies and left forests in smoldering ruins. Its presence was a storm unleashed, wild, unrelenting, and unstoppable. Kamak wasn't just a dragon, it was a force of nature, reminding mortals that they were mere guests in a world governed by powers far greater than their own. In ancient Persia, the natural world was both revered and feared. Mountains were seen as sacred, rivers as life-giving veins of the earth, and fire as a purifying yet potentially destructive force. Kamak's existence wove all these elements together, its towering form echoing the peaks of mountains, its fiery breath evoking the power of the sun, and its wrath mirroring the floods and storms that reshaped the land. To the people who told its stories, Kamak was not merely a creature to be defeated, but a symbol of nature's duality, the giver and taker of life. One tale speaks of a lush valley nestled between two great mountains. The people of this valley lived in harmony with the land, tending to their crops and worshiping the spirits of the earth and sky. But when greed took root, they began to cut down the sacred forests and dam the rivers to expand their dominion. Their actions awoke Kamak from its ancient slumber deep within the mountains. The dragon emerged in a rage, its roar splitting the skies and its breath turning the fertile valley into a wasteland. The legend ends with the survivors, humbled and grieving, vowing never to take more from the land than they needed. This story, like so many others, positions Kamak as more than a villain. It becomes a teacher, albeit a fearsome one, delivering lessons about respect and restraint. The dragon's fury serves as a natural consequence, a reflection of the earth's ability to retaliate when its harmony is disrupted. It was not cruelty but justice, a wild and impartial rebalancing of what had been thrown into chaos. Another tale tells of a daring hunter who sought to slay Kamak, not for the safety of his people but to prove his own strength. Armed with the finest weapons forged by master smiths, he climbed the mountain where Kamak was said to dwell. The dragon, sensing his arrogance, unleashed a torrent of flames that turned the hunter's blade to molten slag. The mountainside trembled, and an avalanche buried the man beneath the stones. The lesson was clear: nature's fury could not be tamed by pride or brute force. Only humility and understanding could hope to coexist with such a power. In these myths, Kamak's wrath often symbolizes the repercussions of human folly. Its destructive power is not random but targeted, a response to hubris, greed, or neglect. It is a force that demands respect, a living reminder that the natural world is not a resource to be exploited without consequence but a partner in life's intricate dance. Kamak's symbolism also extends to the cycles of renewal that follow destruction. Just as the dragon's fury reduces all to ash, it also clears the way for new growth. After Kamak's rampages, the land is left barren, but in time, life returns, stronger, richer, and more vibrant than before. This cycle mirrors the natural order, where even the most devastating storms and wildfires eventually give way to regrowth. Kamak is not only the fury of nature but its capacity for renewal, a paradoxical force of both ending and beginning. Artists and poets have long drawn upon Kamak's image to convey the power and unpredictability of the natural world. In paintings, the dragon is often depicted rising from volcanic peaks or circling thunderclouds, its presence dominating the landscape. In poetry, Kamak's wrath becomes a metaphor for the storms of the human spirit, the inner conflicts that threaten to consume us when we lose sight of what grounds us. The dragon's form is both terrifying and awe-inspiring, a reflection of nature's ability to inspire reverence and fear in equal measure. Even in modern times, Kamak's legend holds relevance. As humanity grapples with environmental challenges, the stories of this ancient dragon serve as a stark reminder of the consequences of imbalance. Kamak's wrath may be mythological, but its message resonates deeply. Nature's fury is not to be ignored or underestimated. It is a force that demands respect, a testament to the power of the earth to assert itself when pushed too far. But the tale of Kamak, like nature itself, never truly ends. For as the ashes settle and the earth grows quiet, there is always a sense that something lingers, a reminder of the dragon's watchful presence, waiting as the mountains hum with stories yet to unfold. The image of the dragon is one that transcends borders, a shared motif of power and mystery across many ancient cultures. In Persian mythology, the dragon, be it the fearsome Kamak or the multi-headed Aži Dahāka, stands as a potent symbol of chaos, destruction, and sometimes transformation. Yet, this archetype was not unique to Persia. As the stories of neighboring civilizations mingled with Persian traditions through trade, conquest, and cultural exchange, the concept of the dragon evolved, reflecting shared fears, aspirations, and philosophies. In the Persian imagination, dragons were formidable beings, often depicted as guardians of treasures or bringers of calamity. Kamak, with its colossal form and fiery breath, embodied the destructive forces of nature, while Aži Dahāka, a three-headed serpent dragon, symbolized tyranny and corruption. These creatures were not simply villains to be vanquished, they represented profound challenges, tests of courage, wisdom, and morality. Persian dragons were often linked to the elemental forces, fire, earth, and water, and their presence in myths underscored humanity's tenuous relationship with the natural world. In neighboring Mesopotamian mythology, dragons also occupied a central role, though with nuances that shaped their interpretation in Persian lore. The Babylonian epic Enuma Elish tells of Tiamat, a primordial dragon of chaos who was slain by the god Marduk to create the heavens and the earth. This narrative, echoing themes of order arising from chaos, likely influenced Persian myths like that of Aži Dahāka, where the dragon's defeat signified the restoration of balance and justice. Further to the east, in Indian mythology, the concept of the Naga, serpent-like beings with divine attributes, intertwined with the Persian dragon archetype. The Nagas were not inherently malevolent, they could be protectors, wise beings who guarded treasures and sacred rivers. This duality may have found resonance in Persian tales, where some dragons, while fearsome, also acted as protectors of sacred places, challenging mortals to prove their worth before gaining access to divine knowledge or treasures. To the west, in Greek mythology, dragons often guarded sacred objects or spaces. The serpent-like Python, who guarded the oracle at Delphi, or Ladon, the dragon who watched over the golden apples of the Hesperides, reflect a shared narrative structure with Persian myths. The stories of heroes confronting these creatures, whether Perseus or Garshasp, underscore the universal appeal of such tales, where the slaying of a dragon symbolizes the triumph of order over chaos or the attainment of enlightenment. The Silk Road, a bustling artery of cultural exchange, played a significant role in spreading dragon lore between Persia, China, and other regions. The Chinese dragon, a symbol of imperial power, wisdom, and prosperity, differs greatly from its Persian counterpart in temperament. Where Persian dragons were wild, untamed forces, the Chinese dragon was a celestial being, a guide and a guardian. Yet, parallels can be drawn, especially in their association with water and their role as intermediaries between the heavens and the earth. These shared attributes hint at a dialogue between cultures, a blending of symbolic meanings that enrich the myths of both regions. Dragons also found their way into Persian and neighboring Islamic tales during the medieval period, where they became woven into the fabric of folklore and poetry. In 1001 Nights, dragons appear as both adversaries and challenges for heroes, their presence a test of wit and valor. These stories, shaped by centuries of cultural intermingling, added new dimensions to the Persian conception of dragons, emphasizing their role in moral and spiritual lessons. Art and literature across these regions captured the evolving image of the dragon, each culture imprinting its values and fears onto the creature. Persian miniatures often depicted dragons coiled around mountains or rivers, their sinuous forms blending with the landscape. Mesopotamian reliefs portrayed them as towering figures locked in combat with gods, while Chinese scrolls rendered them as graceful, serpentine beings entwined with clouds. The variations in these depictions highlight the adaptability of the dragon as a symbol, its ability to embody different aspects of human experience across cultures. Yet, despite these differences, the core essence of the dragon as a guardian, a challenger, and a force of transformation remains consistent. It is a creature that embodies duality, the power to destroy and the power to protect. Whether in the scorching deserts of Persia, the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, or the misty mountains of China, the dragon speaks to a universal truth. The struggles and triumphs of humanity are forever intertwined with the forces that shape the world. The dragons of Persian mythology, with their fiery breath and insatiable hunger, reflect a particular worldview, one rooted in the Zoroastrian dichotomy of good and evil. Yet, as their stories intersected with those of neighboring cultures, they became part of a larger narrative, a shared mythology that bridged nations and ideologies. These creatures, born of earth and fire, continue to soar through the imagination of humankind, their tales reshaping with every generation, their shadows stretching ever further. Beyond the borders of Persia, their wings brush against new skies, their roars mingling with the echoes of other legends waiting to unfold. Kamak's terrifying grandeur has left its mark not only in the spoken tales of ancient Persia but also in its art and literature. From the earliest depictions carved into stone to its echoes in contemporary writings, this dragon of untamed fury has transcended the confines of legend to become a powerful emblem of both nature's wrath and humanity's struggle to understand it. Kamak's image, steeped in fire and chaos, finds its way into mediums that seek to immortalize its ferocity and its lessons. In ancient Persian reliefs, Kamak is often represented as a monstrous creature, its sinewy body coiled around mountains or rivers, symbolizing its dominion over the wild and uncontrollable forces of nature. These carvings, weathered but resilient, served as visual reminders of the dragon's destructive power and the consequences of imbalance. Artisans captured Kamak mid-roar, its fiery breath threatening to consume the heavens. The detailing of these reliefs, the sharp, jagged scales, the piercing eyes, and the immense wings, emphasizes the awe and terror the dragon inspired. The Shahnameh, Ferdowsi's monumental epic, provides the most vivid literary account of Kamak. While Ferdowsi devotes more time to Aži Dahāka, the dragon Kamak appears as a force of nature unleashed upon humanity's hubris. In his descriptions, Kamak is not merely a beast, it is an event, a phenomenon that shakes the mountains and blackens the skies. Ferdowsi's words drip with the weight of inevitability, portraying Kamak's rage as both terrifying and just. This duality, the dragon as a harbinger of destruction and a teacher of humility, became a recurring theme in subsequent literary adaptations. Later Persian poets and writers, inspired by the Shahnameh, expanded on Kamak's symbolism. In mystical Sufi poetry, Kamak transforms from a beast of fury into an allegory for the ego and human desire. Just as the dragon's wrath consumes all in its path, unchecked greed and arrogance can destroy the soul. The act of facing Kamak, then, becomes a metaphor for confronting one's own inner chaos, a step toward spiritual enlightenment. The poetry is vivid, often describing the dragon's fire as a purifying force that burns away illusion and falsehood. Kamak's representation in miniature painting offers another layer of interpretation. Artists during the Timurid and Safavid periods took inspiration from literary descriptions, depicting Kamak as a serpent dragon with scales that glimmered like molten gold and eyes that burned like embers. These miniatures, often part of illuminated manuscripts, paired Kamak with the heroes who sought to vanquish it. In one famous painting, Kamak looms over a mountain pass, its body curling into the horizon as a lone warrior approaches, sword drawn but trembling. The scene captures the sheer scale of the dragon, emphasizing the hero's vulnerability against such an overwhelming force. Even in modern Persian literature and art, Kamak endures as a symbol of humanity's fragile relationship with the natural world. Contemporary poets have reimagined Kamak not as a destroyer but as a tragic figure, a creature bound by its nature to rage against a world that no longer understands it. These works often portray Kamak as a metaphor for environmental destruction, its fury reflecting the Earth's response to exploitation and neglect. In these retellings, Kamak is both victim and aggressor, a reminder of the interconnectedness of all life. Visual artists have also turned to Kamak as a source of inspiration. Modern paintings often reimagine the dragon in abstract forms, using bold, chaotic strokes to convey its raw energy. Sculptors, too, have embraced Kamak, creating installations that capture its immense power and its role as a guardian of nature's balance. One striking example is a sculpture that portrays Kamak mid-flight, its wings fragmented into shards of light, representing both its destructive force and its fleeting, almost ethereal presence in Persian mythology. In popular culture, Kamak has made its way into films, comics, and digital art, where its image is often blended with influences from other dragon myths around the world. While these representations sometimes stray from the original stories, they keep the spirit of Kamak alive, introducing new generations to the awe-inspiring legacy of this mythical creature. The enduring appeal of Kamak lies in its ability to embody contradictions. It is both beast and teacher, villain and force of renewal. Artists and writers across centuries have drawn from its myth to explore themes of power, humility, and transformation. In doing so, they ensure that Kamak's tale, much like the fire it breathes, continues to burn brightly, casting shadows that intertwine with the next chapter of Persian mythology and beyond. In the annals of Persian mythology, few creatures rival the Manticore in sheer intrigue and terror. Known as Martikores in ancient Persian, meaning man-eater, the Manticore is a chimera of unnerving contradictions, part lion, part human, part scorpion, and sometimes part dragon. Its origins lie in a complex tapestry of storytelling that blurred the lines between warning and wonder, symbolizing the dangerous unknown that lay beyond the borders of the familiar world. The first whispers of the Manticore emerged in the oral traditions of Persia, spreading like wildfire through trade routes and into the imaginations of other cultures. Unlike some creatures in Persian lore, which offered wisdom or protection, the Manticore represented the ultimate predator. It was said to have the body of a massive lion with furs so red it resembled the setting sun, a human face twisted into a malevolent grin, and a tail armed with venomous spines that it could launch at its prey. Some stories claimed the Manticore had 3 rows of teeth, sharp and endless, ensuring no victim ever escaped its jaws. The Manticore's haunting features were not mere embellishments, they served as metaphors for the fears of the time. Persia's borders touched vast wildernesses and uncharted territories, lands that were home to predators both real and imagined. The Manticore became a personification of these fears, a creature that stalked the edges of the known world and served as a warning to those who dared to stray too far from safety. Some scholars suggest that the Manticore's mythological background may have roots in real animals encountered in Persia's diverse landscapes. The lion, a symbol of strength and power, was a familiar figure in the region, while the human aspect of the Manticore added an eerie layer of intelligence to its menace. The scorpion-like tail and venomous spines reflected the dangers of the desert, where even the smallest creatures could be deadly. By combining these elements, the Manticore became a composite symbol of everything that could threaten life and stability. The first detailed descriptions of the Manticore were recorded by Greek historians who heard tales of this creature through Persian traders and travelers. Ctesias, a Greek physician and historian who spent time at the Persian court, described the Manticore in his work Indica. According to him, the Manticore lived in the forests of India, a land perceived as mysterious and exotic by the Greeks. This geographical shift reflects how myths evolve as they travel across cultures, each storyteller adding layers of their own interpretations. In Persian lore, however, the Manticore was more than a tale of terror, it was a guardian of forbidden truths. Some stories suggest that the Manticore lurked near hidden treasures or sacred sites, daring only the bravest or most foolhardy to confront it. Its human face was said to be both a blessing and a curse, capable of speech but laced with lies. Those who sought the Manticore's wisdom would find themselves ensnared in riddles and deception, their lives hanging by the fragile thread of their own cunning. The Manticore's mythological role also reflects the Persian worldview of balance and duality. It was a creature of chaos, but its existence served as a counterpoint to the forces of order represented by heroes and divine beings. The Manticore challenged humanity to confront its fears, to outthink and outfight the darkness that loomed both within and without. In this way, the Manticore was not just a monster, it was a mirror, reflecting the primal instincts and vulnerabilities of those who encountered it. As the Manticore legend spread, its image began to shift, adapting to the cultural lenses of those who told its story. In the West, medieval bestiaries adopted the Manticore as a symbol of heresy and deception, its terrifying form representing the consequences of straying from divine truth. Yet, in Persian art and storytelling, the Manticore retained a sense of mystique, a creature feared but also respected for its raw, untamed power. Its enduring legacy in Persian mythology lies in its ability to embody the unknown, to stand as a reminder of what lies beyond the limits of human understanding. The Manticore, with its piercing gaze and deadly tail, remains an enigma, a creature both deeply rooted in its time and timeless in its appeal. Its stories do not merely warn of danger, they challenge the listener to face it, to question the boundaries of courage and the price of curiosity. Just as its tail begins to fade into silence, the sound of its claws scratching against the sands reminds us that its myth is far from over. The Manticore's presence in Persian lore is not one confined to mere whispers of ancient stories. It is a creature that roars through the pages of myth, leaving its mark on every tale it touches. Each story of the Manticore in Persian mythology is laced with danger, wisdom, and the stark reality that the world beyond the known can swallow you whole. These stories are woven into the fabric of Persian cultural consciousness, where every encounter with the beast is not just a battle for survival but a reflection of inner turmoil, deception, and the human spirit. One of the earliest and most well-known stories of the Manticore involves a brave prince who sought to prove his worth by venturing into the untamed wilderness, where the Manticore was said to reside. His name, forgotten by time, is irrelevant. It is the lesson of his journey that lingers. He traveled through scorching deserts and dense forests, determined to find the legendary beast and bring its head back to the king. What he found, however, was far beyond what he had anticipated. Upon reaching the heart of the forest, the prince encountered the Manticore, its red mane shimmering like fire, its human face twisted into a smile that sent chills down his spine. The creature spoke, its voice smooth and laced with a strange wisdom, telling the prince of a treasure hidden deep within the mountains. But the Manticore's offer came with a price. The prince could take the treasure, but only if he agreed to answer a riddle that would test his very soul. The riddle, as simple as it was the hardest question the prince would ever face. "What is it that all men seek, but few can truly possess?" the Manticore asked. The prince, confident in his wit, began to search his mind for the right answer. Riches, fame, and power came to him first, but something told him that the Manticore's riddle held deeper meaning. He paused, feeling the weight of the creature's gaze, and finally answered, "Truth." The Manticore's face twisted into a grin. "You are right," it said. "But you will not be allowed to take the treasure without first finding the truth within yourself." In this version of the tale, the prince's journey becomes one of introspection, where the real challenge lies not in slaying the Manticore, but in confronting his own desires and fears. Many say that the prince returned to the kingdom without the treasure, his mind forever changed by the encounter. The Manticore, having taught him the lesson that the greatest treasures lie not in gold but in self-awareness, disappears back into the forest, leaving only the riddle behind. In another version, the Manticore plays the role of a trickster, deceiving those who seek to destroy it. A mighty warrior, renowned for his strength, set out to kill the Manticore after hearing tales of its savagery. But when the warrior found the beast, it was not the ferocious monster he expected. Instead, the Manticore appeared as a humble sage, sitting on a rock and meditating. The warrior approached with his sword drawn, ready to strike, but the Manticore raised a hand, stopping him. "I do not fight those who seek to prove their strength," the Manticore said. "Instead, I challenge those who believe their minds are sharper than my claws." The Manticore offered the warrior a challenge, a riddle so complex that no mortal mind could solve it. The warrior, despite his physical prowess, was no match for the creature's intellect. In the end, he left the Manticore unharmed, unable to conquer it with brute force alone. In this version, the Manticore teaches the warrior the importance of humility and the limits of power. The stories of the Manticore were not limited to physical battles. In one of the darker tales, the creature is a symbol of vengeance, a beast born from a great injustice. A cruel and corrupt king, whose greed had ravaged the land, was said to have been cursed by the gods and transformed into the Manticore. Once a ruler who lived for nothing but his own desires, he now prowled the wilderness, the embodiment of his own moral decay. The people of the kingdom feared the Manticore, but it was only a few brave souls who sought to confront it. One such soul was a humble peasant girl, whose family had suffered under the king's rule. She ventured into the wilderness, not armed with a sword, but with a heart full of courage and a deep understanding of justice. When she faced the Manticore, the creature's eyes filled with recognition. It saw in her the spirit of the people it had once ruled with an iron fist. But the girl, with a steady voice, confronted the Manticore, revealing that its true enemy was not the world, but the guilt it carried. The Manticore, after hearing her words, crumbled under the weight of its own shame and vanished into the earth, leaving only the faintest traces of its existence behind. In Persian folklore, the Manticore serves as a mirror to the human condition. Each story told of the beast is not simply about a monster to be slain, but about the inner struggles of the individuals who encounter it. Whether as a guardian of truth, a challenger of power, or a manifestation of guilt, the Manticore forces those who face it to look beyond the surface and confront what lies within. The legends of the Manticore live on, like the echo of a roar that shakes the heart and soul. Each new version, each retelling, brings forth the lessons of the past, ensuring that the Manticore's myth remains alive, growing with each telling, each generation. No matter how many times the creature is slain in stories, it always rises again, as much a part of the myth as the people who create it. And just as the Manticore continues to live in these tales, so too does the challenge it presents, the challenge to face what lies within, no matter how terrifying it may seem. The Manticore, with its terrifying visage, a lion's body, a human's face, and a tail that could pierce the heavens, has been a constant symbol in Persian mythology. More than just a creature of brute force, it embodies a profound and haunting warning, one that resonates deeply across time and cultures. Its very existence serves as a cautionary tale, a symbol of the consequences of overreaching ambition, unchecked power, and the perilous path of hubris. In the stories where the Manticore appears, it is often a harbinger of doom, a reminder that there are forces in the world beyond human control, forces that cannot be vanquished by mere strength or pride. The Manticore represents the balance between the natural and supernatural realms, and its presence in the mythological landscape warns that when this balance is disturbed, destruction follows. The creature's human face, so unsettling in its expressions, is perhaps the most telling feature. It is a face that mirrors humanity itself, capable of both great wisdom and unspeakable cruelty. When a hero or a traveler encounters the Manticore, it often presents a choice, a riddle, a test, a challenge. The choice is rarely clear-cut, and the hero's decision often leads to dire consequences. The Manticore's face, twisted in a grin, suggests that humanity's greatest threat is not the external dangers of the world, but the darker aspects of the self, the greed, the arrogance, the desire for control that can blind a person to the harm they cause. Take, for example, the tale of the prince who sought to kill the Manticore for glory. In the story, the prince's pride led him to believe that slaying such a fearsome creature would cement his place as a great hero. But the Manticore did not attack with claws or teeth. Instead, it challenged the prince's understanding of what it meant to be a hero. The prince's pride became his downfall, as he was caught in the Manticore's riddle, unable to see the true meaning of heroism. The Manticore, in this sense, embodies the dangers of self-deception and the idea that the pursuit of glory at any cost will ultimately lead to destruction. The warning is clear: greatness achieved through vanity or pride is hollow, and the consequences are far-reaching. Another story tells of a kingdom ruled by a tyrant, whose cruelty and greed knew no bounds. The king's empire was built on the suffering of others, and his desire for power was insatiable. It was said that the Manticore, born from the earth itself, arose as a response to his tyranny. The creature, with its venomous tail, sought not only to strike at the heart of the king's empire, but to remind the people of the cost of unchecked ambition. As the king grew more desperate, the Manticore's warning became clearer: no kingdom built on suffering would endure, and those who sought to control everything would ultimately find themselves alone, consumed by their own excess. In this version of the myth, the Manticore is less a monster than a moral force. It punishes not by killing, but by exposing the flaws of those who encounter it. The venomous tail, capable of delivering a lethal blow, becomes symbolic of the slow but inevitable consequences of corruption and injustice. Just as the Manticore's poison spreads throughout its victim's body, the harm caused by greed and tyranny spreads through the land, corrupting everything it touches. The creature's very existence is a reminder that unchecked power, once attained, is a double-edged sword. It will consume the wielder as much as it consumes its victims. The Manticore's symbolism also stretches beyond the idea of personal corruption to encompass a larger, cosmic warning about the balance of nature and the world. It is said that the Manticore appears during times of great imbalance, when the forces of nature or humanity's actions threaten to tip the scales of order. The creature is a manifestation of nature's wrath, a force that cannot be reasoned with or defeated by brute force. In this light, the Manticore warns of the consequences of disregarding the natural world, of exploiting its resources without regard for the delicate equilibrium that sustains life. In one of the darker legends, the Manticore is summoned by the gods as a consequence of human folly. The people, driven by greed, had overharvested the land, hunted the forests to near extinction, and ignored the cries of the earth itself. In response, the Manticore emerged, devastating the land in a fury of fire and poison. It was not merely a punishment, but a lesson, a reminder that nature must be respected, that balance must be maintained. The Manticore's wrath was not random, it was a deliberate response to human transgression, a warning that the natural world would always exact a price for disrespect. Over the centuries, the Manticore's role as a warning has been passed down, evolving to reflect the fears and concerns of different eras. In more modern retellings, the creature has come to symbolize the dangers of unchecked technological advancement or the hubristic desire to control nature and humanity itself. Its presence in these stories is less about physical destruction and more about the moral implications of humanity's actions. The Manticore is no longer just a beast to be slain, it is a reflection of humanity's own destructive tendencies, its tendency to push boundaries, to seek power without understanding the cost. The Manticore stands as a timeless reminder that the path of ambition, when untethered from wisdom and compassion, leads only to ruin. Its roar, once a terrifying sound in the wilds of Persia, now echoes in the modern world, calling us to question our own actions, our own desires, and the balance we strike with the world around us. As the Manticore watches, its human face twisted in a silent smile, it beckons us to reflect on the choices we make, the paths we tread, and the consequences of overstepping our bounds. The creature may be slain in stories, but its warning endures. Persian mythological creatures, with their intricate symbolism and vivid imagery, have woven themselves into the very fabric of the human consciousness. They are no longer confined to the dusty pages of ancient manuscripts or the forgotten corners of folklore. They have endured, evolving and adapting, influencing everything from art to philosophy to modern-day storytelling. These creatures, once born of the need to explain the mysteries of the world and the depths of human emotion, continue to shape our understanding of both the ancient and the contemporary. At the heart of the enduring legacy of these mythical beings is their ability to transcend time and geography. The creatures that populated the myths of Persia were never meant to stay within the borders of an ancient empire. They were designed to speak to universal truths, to give shape to the fears, hopes, and desires of the human spirit. From the fierce and regal Simurgh, embodying wisdom and healing, to the chaotic, terrifying Daevas, representing corruption and destruction, each creature has carved a niche in the collective human psyche, serving as both a mirror and a guide. What sets these creatures apart from those of other mythologies is the duality they represent. They are not one-dimensional monsters or simple heroes, they exist in a complex space, embodying both light and dark, destruction and creation, order and chaos. This complexity allows them to continue to resonate, even in modern times, because they reflect the internal struggles and contradictions that every person faces. The Simurgh, for instance, is not just a bird of wisdom and healing, she is also a creature of immense power, whose ability to help or harm depends on the heart of the one who seeks her. This duality speaks to the constant human battle between good and evil, wisdom and ignorance, healing and destruction. Similarly, the Manticore, with its unsettling mix of lion, human, and scorpion, stands as a reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition, hubris, and pride. Its stories, whether about a prince, a tyrant, or a kingdom, hold lessons that are as relevant today as they were centuries ago. In the modern world, where power and greed often go unchecked, the Manticore's warning echoes louder than ever. It challenges us to reflect on the choices we make, on the prices we are willing to pay for glory, and on the balance between ambition and humility. These mythological creatures also continue to inspire artists, writers, and thinkers, from Persian poets like Ferdowsi to contemporary creators across the globe. Their stories serve as a source of endless inspiration, transforming in the hands of modern storytellers, filmmakers, and artists. Just as the Manticore was reinterpreted through the ages to reflect the shifting values of Persian society, so too are these creatures reshaped today to reflect the complexities of our own world. Whether they appear in films, novels, or graphic novels, they retain their power to captivate, to disturb, and to inspire. In the realm of art, Persian mythological creatures have left an indelible mark. Persian miniatures, with their vibrant colors and intricate detail, depict these creatures in ways that bring them to life. The fierce yet majestic Simurgh is shown soaring through the skies, a symbol of divine wisdom and strength. The wrathful, dark Daevas are painted as menacing forces, casting long shadows that stretch over kingdoms and empires. These visual representations are not merely artistic, they are a way of keeping the essence of these creatures alive, a visual manifestation of their ongoing relevance. The symbolic meaning behind these creatures also extends into modern philosophy, where they continue to be studied and discussed as metaphors for human nature and society. The Paris, once mischievous and deceptive, are now seen as representations of beauty, grace, and the transcendence of the soul. The Daevas, once solely embodiments of evil, are reconsidered in the light of internal conflict and personal struggle. They ask us to confront the darkness within ourselves, to understand the forces of corruption and greed that can take hold in the most unexpected places. These creatures are not simply figures from a distant past, they are reflections of the forces that still shape our lives today. The most striking aspect of the legacy of Persian mythological creatures is their ability to adapt to the changing needs of the world. While they retain their core characteristics, strength, wisdom, chaos, and beauty, they are constantly reinterpreted and reshaped, ensuring their place in the modern imagination. They speak to timeless truths and human experiences that remain relevant no matter how much the world changes. They are a part of who we are, of how we understand ourselves and the world around us. At their core, these creatures remind us that mythology is not just about the past, it is a living, breathing force that continues to influence and guide us. Whether in the stories we tell our children, the art we create, or the philosophies we follow, Persian mythological creatures endure as symbols of the struggles we face, the wisdom we seek, and the lessons we learn. Their legacy is not just in the stories we remember, but in the ways those stories continue to shape us, guiding us through the darkness and into the light. In the end, the mythological creatures of Persia are more than just characters in ancient tales. They are embodiments of human experience, lasting symbols of the hopes and fears that bind us all. They have not faded into obscurity, rather, they continue to evolve and inspire, serving as a reminder that the myths we create today will be the legacies of tomorrow. Just as the Simurgh, the Manticore, and the Daevas continue to rise from the pages of history, so too will the creatures of our own imagination leave their mark on the world for generations to come. Persian mythological creatures, with their vivid presence and profound symbolism, have not only survived the passage of time but have also flourished in the hearts and minds of people across generations. They are the echoes of an ancient world, forever alive in art, literature, and even in the values we hold dear. These beings, woven into the very fabric of Persian culture, have shaped our understanding of good and evil, wisdom and ignorance, creation and destruction. As we look back at these stories, it is impossible not to feel their pulse still beating in the world today. They may belong to ancient Persia, but their legacy is universal, and their relevance never fades. The creatures of Persian mythology are more than just figures of legend, they are reflections of the human experience. Each one represents a fundamental aspect of life: the Simurgh, the healing and wise bird that embodies the balance of nature; the fierce, destructive Daevas, who personify the darkest corners of ambition and power; the Manticore, a chilling reminder of the dangers of pride and the consequences of unchecked ambition. These creatures serve as both lessons and warnings, their stories teaching us about the inner workings of the soul, the consequences of our choices, and the delicate balance of the world we live in. What makes these creatures so enduring is not just their incredible power or their terrifying features, but the deep truths they represent. The Simurgh, with her wings spread wide, symbolizes the connection between heaven and earth, a symbol of wisdom and healing that transcends the bounds of human comprehension. Her presence in Persian myths is more than just a tale of a mythical bird. She is a guiding force, embodying the balance we strive for in our own lives. When her feathers are used in times of need, they offer not just physical healing, but spiritual guidance. She shows us that healing comes not just through power, but through understanding, compassion, and wisdom. On the other side of the spectrum, we find the Daevas, creatures of darkness and malevolence, whose very existence challenges the forces of light and order. In their twisted forms, we see the consequences of corruption, greed, and tyranny, qualities that continue to plague humanity. The Daevas are not just monsters to be slain, they are the embodiment of the internal struggles we all face. They remind us that darkness is not something external to us, but something that exists within, waiting to consume us if we let it. Their constant struggle against the heroes of Persian mythology is a metaphor for the battle between good and evil, but also the battle we each must fight within ourselves. The Manticore, with its lion's body, human face, and scorpion tail, is perhaps one of the most powerful symbols of how our own flaws and desires can turn against us. Its terrifying form serves as a reflection of the dangers of hubris, of the human need to conquer and control, no matter the cost. The Manticore is a reminder that power, when wielded without wisdom, becomes destructive. The very qualities that make it a formidable creature, its intelligence, its strength, are the same qualities that lead to its tragic end. And in the same way, when human ambition is unchecked by morality and foresight, it can lead to ruin. The Manticore's warning is clear: strive for greatness, but never at the expense of your soul. But these creatures also hold a deeper, more spiritual significance. They are symbols of the forces of nature, the elements that make up the world around us. The Huma bird, for example, represents fortune and grace, a symbol of divine favor that transcends earthly constraints. In the same way that the Simurgh embodies healing, the Huma embodies hope and rebirth. Her ability to bring blessings, to guide the hands of kings and warriors, is a reflection of the unseen forces that shape our destiny. Through her, we are reminded that fate is not always in our hands, and sometimes the most important gift is the ability to trust in the guidance that the universe provides. The endurance of these mythological creatures lies in their ability to speak to something timeless within us. In every age, in every culture, there is a need for these stories to remind us of our roots, to reflect on the choices we make, and to face the consequences of those choices. From ancient Persian frescoes to modern-day novels, the images of these creatures continue to inspire artists and thinkers alike. Their stories evolve, their meanings shift, but their core truths remain unchanged. They are not just relics of a bygone era, they are living symbols, constantly shaping the way we view the world and ourselves. Today, the legacy of Persian mythological creatures continues to inspire the world of art, literature, and philosophy. In the works of contemporary Persian poets and storytellers, these creatures live on, reshaped and reinterpreted, but still holding onto the same essence that made them so powerful in the first place. Their tales are told in new forms, films, television shows, graphic novels, but the underlying messages remain constant: the struggle for balance, the dangers of unchecked ambition, the power of wisdom and compassion. Through the centuries, the stories of these creatures have transcended borders, carried across oceans and continents by the winds of time. They have influenced other cultures and mythologies, appearing in various forms in the art and literature of the ancient world, and their impact can still be felt today. Whether it is the symbolism of the Simurgh in the works of poets like Rumi, or the enduring images of the Manticore in modern fantasy fiction, these creatures continue to resonate with audiences worldwide. The mythological creatures of Persia are not just the stuff of ancient stories, they are timeless symbols that remind us of who we are and what we can become. They teach us the value of wisdom, the importance of balance, and the cost of ambition. They show us that light and darkness, good and evil, beauty and terror, exist not just in the world around us, but within ourselves. Their legacy endures because they speak to the deepest truths of the human experience, truths that are as relevant today as they were in the ancient past. As long as we continue to tell their stories, to create art inspired by them, to reflect on the lessons they impart, the creatures of Persian mythology will continue to live. They will live in the words we speak, the art we create, and the choices we make. Their legacy is eternal, a reminder that mythology is not just about the past, it is about the present and the future as well.